Hospitals are places of healing, but some bear scars that go beyond medicine. Across the United States, many hospitals were once asylums, mental institutions, and centers for the forgotten, and some of their darkest histories never left. Patients, staff, and visitors alike have reported unexplained footsteps, shadowy figures in empty hallways, doors slamming on their own, and whispered voices that echo through abandoned wards. Tonight, we explore 25 of the most haunted hospitals in America that were once asylums, where the past lingers, madness whispers, and the line between life and death fades into chilling uncertainty. Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, stands as one of the most infamous haunted locations in American enormous. Decaying structure perched on a hilltop, looming above the trees like a monument to a forgotten era of suffering. Once a bustling tuberculosis hospital where thousands fought for their lives, it later became a general hospital before being shuttered for good. Today, the building sits abandoned, swallowed by shadows and silence, yet alive in ways that defy explanation. Visitors, investigators, and trespassers have all come away with the same conclusion. Something still walks the halls of Waverly Hills. The exterior alone sets the stage for the fear that follows. The 5-story brick building stretches out like a fortress, its windows shattered, its walls discolored by decades of neglect. Vines creep through the cracks, and the wind whistles through empty corridors, carrying a chill that feels colder than the Kentucky air should allow. Those who approach the entrance describe an overwhelming sense of being watched, as if the building itself is aware of every step closer. Inside, the atmosphere changes instantly. The temperature drops, often by 10 degrees or more, and the air becomes heavy. Investigators speak of a metallic scent, like old blood or rust, that lingers through certain rooms. Flashlights flicker unpredictably, batteries drain faster than they should, and footsteps echo from floors above and below even when no one is there. Many say Waverly Hills feels less like a building and more like a living, breathing entity, one with memories soaked into the walls. Ghostly figures are reported throughout the sanatorium, but the most common sightings occur in the long hallways. These corridors stretch seemingly forever, dimly lit by the occasional beam of moonlight slipping through broken windows. People walking through them describe silhouettes drifting across their path, just out of reach of their flashlights. Some figures appear solid, others transparent, and many vanish the moment a light is pointed toward them. One visitor described seeing a man in an old hospital gown standing in the distance. He didn't move, didn't react, didn't blink, but when the visitor looked away for a split second to steady their light, the figure disappeared, completely. No sound, no footsteps, nothing left behind. Cold spots are another hallmark of Waverly's haunting. They don't simply feel like drafts or breezes, but sudden drops to near-freezing temperatures, often in small, specific areas. Investigators have walked through rooms where their breath suddenly fogged the air, though the temperature outside hovered in the warm summer range. These icy patches seem almost intelligent, following certain visitors or clustering around people who show fear. Some describe feeling hands brush against their arms or shoulders, in these moments hands that are ice cold and vanish as quickly as they appear. Perhaps the most chilling reports involve the sounds echoing from empty rooms. Screams, sharp, sudden, and filled with pain, have been heard reverberating through the hallways. Sometimes they are distant, other times so close they cause visitors to freeze where they stand. These screams come from areas confirmed to be empty, often late at night when the building is at its darkest. Some believe they are echoes of former patients who endured great suffering during the height of the tuberculosis epidemic, when Waverly Hills struggled to keep up with the overwhelming number of cases. Former staff members, long before the building fell into disrepair, reported hearing similar sounds, pleas for help, coughing fits, and even whispered conversations from behind closed doors. Yet, whenever a room was opened, it was found empty. Some nurses recounted hearing footsteps pacing back and forth in unused patient rooms, only to find no one inside. Even those who didn't believe in ghosts admitted that Waverly had an energy unlike any other hospital. One of the most frequently mentioned locations is the infamous body chute, a long underground tunnel once used to transport deceased patients discreetly away from the main building. The intent was to prevent other patients from seeing the dead and losing hope, but the tunnel gained a sinister reputation. Today, those who venture inside report hearing dragging sounds along the floor, as though something unseen is being pulled through the darkness. Some claim to hear faint crying, others footsteps that follow them but never approach fully. Flashlights often fail inside the tunnel, and the oppressive darkness seems to absorb all sound except the unexplained noises that linger ahead. Another area known for paranormal activity is the 5th floor, particularly room 502. Legends swirl around the tragedies associated with this room, though details vary depending on who tells the story. What remains consistent are the experiences people have inside it: sudden nausea, dizziness, heavy pressure on the chest, and the overwhelming urge to leave the moment they step inside. Many report seeing a shadowy figure standing near the windows, watching silently before fading away. Despite its dark history and chilling encounters, Waverly Hills continues to draw people from around the world: paranormal investigators seeking evidence, thrill seekers hoping for an encounter, and those simply curious about its reputation. Some leave with nothing but the memory of a creepy building, while others leave with recordings, photographs, and stories they'll never forget. One ranger recalled a night that still haunts him. While patrolling the 2nd floor, he heard what sounded like someone running down the hallway. Thinking it was a trespasser, he followed the sound, flashlight in hand. But as he turned the corner, he saw a dark figure standing at the far end of the hall. Its outline was human, but its eyes glowed faintly, like embers in the dark. The ranger shouted, but the figure didn't move. Then, in an instant, it vanished, leaving only silence and the echo of footsteps fading into nothing. Waverly Hills Sanatorium remains a place where the past refuses to rest, where shadows move with purpose, and where the echoes of suffering continue to ripple through time. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, the stories that come from its halls leave little doubt that something still lingers there. And those who dare to enter quickly learn that Waverly Hills does not easily let go of those who walk its corridors. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia, stands like a massive stone sentinel, stretching nearly a quarter mile across the landscape. Its towering Victorian architecture once symbolized hope for treatment and sanctuary. But now, the enormous building looms with a far different reputation. Abandoned for decades, the asylum is considered one of the most haunted places in America. Its walls seem to breathe with the memories of thousands who lived, suffered, and died there. Today, those who dare to step inside find themselves confronting a chilling mixture of history and something far more spectral. Walking toward the asylum, visitors often comment on the uneasy feeling that settles in before they even cross the threshold. The building's facade, carved from gray hand-cut stone, is imposing enough, but it's the silence around it that unnerves people the most. Birds rarely perch on the roof, and even the wind seems hesitant to pass through the broken windows. The moment you approach the entrance, the air feels heavier, charged with an electric tension that sinks into the skin. Inside, the atmosphere shifts drastically. The corridors stretch endlessly, lined with flaking paint, rusted metal bed frames, and the remnants of long-abandoned medical equipment. It's a place frozen in time, trapped between its grim past and something lingering in the present. Visitors quickly notice that the asylum feels far from empty. Footsteps echo where no living person walks, and doorways appear darker than the shadows around them. Many who tour the building report seeing shadowy figures wandering the halls. These figures rarely appear fully formed. Instead, they manifest as silhouettes slipping out of sight, moving from room to room with uncanny speed, or standing silently in doorways before dissolving into darkness. Some shadows are small, resembling children. Others stretch tall and thin, lingering near the ceilings as though floating. They never speak, but their presence fills the space with a cold, watchful stillness. One investigator described walking through Ward F when he saw what looked like a woman in a patient gown standing at the end of the corridor. Her head was bowed, her long hair obscuring her face. Thinking she was part of a reenactment or costume tour, he called out. She slowly lifted her head, revealing nothing but darkness where her face should have been. Before he could react, she vanished into the wall, leaving only a wave of icy air in her wake. Phantom laughter is one of the most unnerving experiences reported inside the asylum. It doesn't sound distant or muffled like an echo. It's often right beside visitors, sudden and sharp, as though someone is standing just over their shoulder. Sometimes it's a child's giggle, light and quick. Other times, it's deeper, cracked with age, or laced with hysteria. Guides tell stories of groups walking the hallways when the entire corridor fills with laughter, bouncing from wall to wall in a chilling chorus that doesn't fade but stops abruptly, as if cut off mid-breath. Some attribute the laughter to the asylum's past, when overcrowding, mistreatment, and desperation were common. Patients were often confined for years, their conditions misunderstood and their spirits broken. Many believe their emotional turmoil has etched itself into the walls, replaying in fragments like a broken record. Doors opening by themselves is another frequent phenomenon. Visitors have watched heavy, rusted doors swing open slowly, as though pushed by an unseen hand. Others slam shut without warning, the sound reverberating through the halls like thunder. In some rooms, doors creep open repeatedly, regardless of how many times someone closes them. Paranormal investigators have filmed doorknobs turning on their own, twisting with deliberate force. One security guard recalled patrolling the medical wing late at night. He heard a door creak open behind him, followed by soft footsteps. Thinking a trespasser had entered the building, he turned around to confront them, but no one was there. The door he had just passed was wide open, moving slightly as though someone had just slipped through. Before he could radio the sighting, the door swung shut with such force it shook the floor beneath him. The asylum's infamous Civil War wing is known for more intense activity. The building once served as a makeshift barracks, and many soldiers reportedly died within its walls. Visitors walking through this area often feel strong, sudden drafts of cold air or pressure on their chests. Some hear faint marching, like boots striking the floor in unison, though the wing is empty. Another hotspot is the seclusion cells, small rooms once used for the most troubled or dangerous patients. The walls are scarred with scratches, and the atmosphere inside is suffocating. Many claim to hear whispering in these rooms, soft voices rising and falling, speaking words that are impossible to understand. Others feel as though someone is standing right behind them, breathing down their neck. Even experienced investigators admit they refuse to linger in these cells for long. One of the most commonly seen spirits is that of a young girl named Lily, believed to have lived in the asylum most of her short life. Visitors leave toys for her in a small room dedicated to her memory. The toys often move on their own. Balls roll across the floor, music boxes play without being touched, and motion sensors go off when no one is near. Many describe feeling a tug on their sleeve or the sensation of a small hand slipping into theirs for a moment before vanishing. Despite its haunting activity, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum remains a place of fascination. People travel from all over the world to experience the building's dark energy and the lingering presence of those who once walked its halls. Some leave with recordings of unexplained voices, others with photographs of shadow figures. Many leave with the unsettling feeling that something followed them out. The asylum stands as a powerful reminder of a time when the misunderstood were hidden away, their stories lost to the passage of years. And while the building may be abandoned, the echoes of its past still move through every hallway, every room, and every shadow. Those who enter its depths often discover that the spirits within are never truly silent and that the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum watches every visitor who steps inside. The Mendota Mental Health Institute in Madison, Wisconsin, is a place that carries its history in every creaking floorboard and shadowed corridor. Founded in the 19th century, it has long served as a psychiatric facility. Those sections of the institution now sit abandoned, untouched for decades. These unused wings, sealed off from daily operations, have gained a chilling reputation among staff, visitors, and investigators alike. They speak of voices whispering in the emptiness, ghostly figures drifting through hallways, and sudden drops in temperature that seem to come from nowhere. Mendota is a place where the past refuses to fade quietly, where the echoes of former patients linger long after their stories have ended. Visitors who enter the abandoned wings often describe a sudden shift in atmosphere. The liveliness of the active hospital disappears as the old iron doors close behind them. The air becomes colder, thicker, carrying a faint smell of dust and disinfectant that has clung to the walls for decades. Paint peels from the ceilings in curled flakes. Rust stains spread across the metal fixtures, and long stretches of the building remain shrouded in darkness, except for the narrow beams of flashlights. It is in this unsettling environment that the strange occurrences begin. One of the most frequently reported phenomena is the sound of disembodied voices calling out names. These voices are not just faint echoes or indistinct murmurs. They speak clearly, sometimes softly, sometimes sharply, as if trying to get someone's attention. Investigators have captured recordings where a woman's voice calls, "Hello," or a man whispers a name none of the team recognizes. Often, visitors hear their own names called, spoken in tones that mimic someone familiar. The voices rarely seem aggressive, but their clarity and closeness unsettle even the bravest explorers. A former maintenance worker once shared his experience while repairing lighting fixtures near one of the sealed wings. He heard someone say his name clearly, right behind him. When he turned, expecting to see a coworker, the hallway was empty. The voice called again, this time farther away, drifting into the darkness. No one else was on that floor. He finished the job in a hurry and refused to go back alone. Figures in white gowns are another hallmark of Mendota's haunting reputation. These apparitions appear as silhouettes at first, tall, thin shapes lingering at the edges of hallways or standing in doorways. As visitors look closer, the details sharpen enough to show long gowns, bare feet, and hair that hangs loosely around pale faces. The figures rarely move quickly. Instead, they glide or stand motionless, watching silently before fading into the shadows. One visitor on a historic tour said she saw a woman in a white gown standing at the end of a long corridor. The figure had her head bowed, hands clasped in front of her. Thinking she was part of a reenactment display, the visitor blinked and the figure vanished completely. The guide later confirmed that no actors were present, and that particular wing had been closed for years. Another commonly reported apparition is that of a younger figure, possibly a teenage patient from the early 20th century. Investigators often find her lingering near the recreation room, an area once used by adolescent patients. She is described as wearing a thin white dress, her form faint and flickering like a candle flame. Some have seen her peering through cracked windows, while others report seeing her reflection in glass panes, though she is never there when they turn around. Sudden temperature drops intensify the sense of being watched. These cold spots appear abruptly, without any logical source. People walking through a warm room describe stepping into a pocket of icy air, so cold they can see their breath. Sometimes, the temperature plummets by 20 degrees in seconds. What makes these drops so unnerving is that they often occur immediately after a voice is heard, or just before an apparition appears. One paranormal team recorded a moment when the temperature plunged so quickly their equipment began to malfunction. Their breath fogged, and one investigator felt a tight pressure on his arm, as though someone had gripped him. Moments later, a faint figure crossed the hallway ahead of them, drifting silently and dissolving into the darkness. Doors in the abandoned wings behave strangely as well. Heavy doors that should remain stationary swing open slowly, as though pushed by invisible hands. Others close with a soft click or slam shut abruptly, echoing through the empty corridors. Staff who monitor the building at night have reported hearing doors opening and closing down hallways they know are locked. Yet when they check, the doors remain perfectly still. Some believe the phenomena stem from the emotional weight held within the walls. Mendota was once home to patients who suffered deeply, often during times when psychiatric treatments were far more experimental and misunderstood than they are today. The anguish, fear, In isolation they experienced may have left imprints behind, echoes of their presence, lingering in the places they once occupied. Others think the spirits are simply restless, drawn to the parts of the building where they lived most of their lives. The white gowns reflect the uniforms patients once wore. The voices calling names may be spirits searching for lost friends, nurses, or family members. The cold spots, some say, are manifestations of their attempts to reach across the divide, leaving traces in the physical world. Staff members who have worked in the active parts of the hospital sometimes feel a presence watching them, especially near the older sections. Some avoid certain hallways entirely. Others say they've seen figures standing behind closed doors, only to find nothing when they open them. The abandoned wings of Mendota Mental Health Institute remain a place where history and the supernatural intertwine. Visitors come seeking answers, but most leave with more questions about the voices that whisper their names, the pale figures that drift through the halls, and the cold air that surrounds them like a warning. Whether these phenomena are echoes of the past or active spirits still lingering, Mendota remains one of Wisconsin's most haunted institutions, a place where the veil between worlds feels especially thin. Pinehurst Asylum in Spring City, Pennsylvania, stands as a chilling reminder of an era when the misunderstood and the marginalized were tucked away from society. Once one of the most infamous institutions in the country, Pinehurst's sprawling campus now sits largely abandoned, overrun by nature and time. Its decaying buildings loom with cracked windows and sagging roofs, the echo of past suffering trapped in every corridor. Locals who wander too close to the old wards say the asylum has never truly emptied. They tell stories of shadowy apparitions drifting through broken doorways, strange whispers that rise from the darkness, and objects that move without any visible hand to guide them. The approach to Pinehurst feels like entering another world. Narrow roads weave through dense woods before opening into a clearing dominated by towering brick structures. The silence is unsettling, too still, too heavy. Even the birds seem to avoid the grounds. The wind whistles through shattered glass, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and rusted metal. Many who visit say they feel watched long before they step inside the ruins. Inside, the air changes immediately. The temperature drops, despite the outside weather. Dust hangs thick, swirling in every beam of light that sneaks through the broken windows. Paint peels in long curls from the walls, and old wheelchairs sit abandoned in hallways, their metal frames groaning softly as though adjusting to an unseen weight. It is in this unsettling environment that the strange phenomena begin. Shadowy apparitions are the most commonly reported experience at Pinehurst. Visitors describe seeing human-like figures drifting through hallways, standing near windows, or peering from behind doorframe. These figures range in size and shapes, some small, some unnaturally tall, but they share one disturbing characteristic. They dissolve into nothing when approached. Many appear only for a second, a flicker of darkness against the dim light, while others linger long enough to observe before slipping away. One local man, who grew up near the asylum, recalled walking past the old administration building at dusk. As he glanced at a second-story window, he saw a figure standing there, perfectly still. The figure's outline was sharp, unmistakably human, but there were no eyes, no facial features, only darkness. When he blinked, the figure vanished, leaving the window empty and cold. Strange whispers are another pervasive phenomenon in the abandoned wards. These whispers don't rise like echoes or distant conversations. They often sound close, terrifyingly close. People walking through the tunnels hear soft voices murmuring from behind walls or drifting down staircases. Some whispers resolve into words. "Help me. Don't go. Stay here." Others sound like breathy laughter or frantic muttering. Investigators have captured audio recordings where multiple voices speak at once, overlapping in a chorus of fear and confusion. One paranormal team reported hearing whispers that seemed to follow them room to room as they moved through the deaf wing, a part of the asylum once used to house patients with hearing impairments. They heard a soft voice say, "I see you." The team froze, but the voice continued, repeating the phrase with increasing clarity. No one else was in the building. Objects moving on their own add another layer of terror to Pinehurst's reputation. Heavy doors swing open without touch, sometimes with slow, deliberate motion, other times with violent force. Metal gurneys roll a few inches across the floor as though pushed by unseen hands. Small objects like pebbles or pieces of plaster fall, not from ceilings, but from empty air. Flashlights flicker and tilt, as though someone has brushed past. One visitor, exploring the old wards, set her backpack on the ground while adjusting her camera. When she turned back, the backpack was gone, moved several feet down the hallway. No footsteps, no sound, no explanation. She retrieved it quickly and left the building without looking back. The underground tunnels that connect the buildings are considered the heart of Pinehurst's haunting activity. These tunnels, once used to transport patients unseen by the public, are narrow, pitch black, and uncomfortably cold. Visitors often feel disoriented when walking through them. Some describe sudden dizziness, while others feel as though someone is walking directly behind them. When they turn around, no one is there. Yet the sensation remains persistent, pressing, impossible to ignore. One investigator captured a chilling experience while walking through the tunnels alone. His audio recorder picked up a slow, rhythmic tapping sound. At first it seemed distant, then closer, then directly beside him. When he lifted his flashlight, he caught the brief outline of a figure crouched against the wall. By the time he steadied the light, the figure had vanished completely, leaving only silence. The old children's ward is another hotspot of activity. Objects in this area appear to move more frequently. More toys left by visitors shift positions. Rocking horses sway gently without touch, and drawers slide open on their own. Some say they hear the faint sound of crying, others the soft patter of feet. A few people claim to have seen child-sized shadows darting across rooms, moving too quickly to be human. The administration building, with its grand staircase and old offices, seems to attract more intelligent or aware spirits. Visitors report feeling observed from the moment they enter. Figures appear at the top of the stairs, only to disappear when approached. Doors open and close, as though someone is pacing through the rooms. Some report feeling a hand on their shoulder or a tug at their clothing, though no one else is nearby. The history of Pinehurst explains much of its haunting. For decades, the institution housed thousands of people, children, and adults with disabilities, mental illnesses, or simply those deemed unfit for society. Overcrowding, neglect, and mistreatment created an environment filled with despair and fear. Many patients lived and died within its walls, their stories lost or ignored. Locals believe the lingering spirits are the echoes of those who never found peace. Today, Pinehurst stands as both a monument to its tragic past and a magnet for paranormal enthusiasts. Those who visit often leave with a sense that they weren't alone, that someone nor many walked beside them unseen. The shadowy apparitions, the whispers that rise from empty rooms, and the objects that move without explanation all weave a chilling narrative. Pinehurst Asylum remains a place where the lines between the living and the dead are forever blurred, where the past breathes through the cracks of every abandoned ward. Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts stands as a brooding relic of America's psychiatric past. Once hailed as a marvel of Kirkbride architecture, its castle-like silhouette now sits in eerie silence, towering over the surrounding hillside. But even years after its closure, travelers who pass near the old grounds swear the building has never truly gone quiet. They report screams echoing through empty corridors, floating figures gliding past shattered windows, and shadowy nurses who appear late at night, remnants of a history marked by fear, suffering, and the unknown. Approaching Danvers, visitors often describe an immediate sense of unease, as if the air itself thickens the closer they get. The long, winding driveway feels isolated from the rest of the world. Trees arch overhead, blocking out light, and the hulking structure rises at the end, illuminated only by moonlight or distant street lamps. Though much of the original hospital has been repurposed or demolished, enough remains to remind people of what once took place there. Inside the abandoned sections, the environment shifts sharply. Cold air seeps through broken windows, drifting across peeling paint and rusted pipes. Old furniture lies overturned. Hospital beds sit twisted in forgotten rooms, and graffiti marks walls where silence once reigned. Yet beneath the decay, there is a sense of presence, something watching, listening, waiting. The screams are often the first sign that visitors are not alone. They start faintly, almost indistinguishable from the wind, but then they grow louder, sharper, echoing down hallways that have been empty for decades. Some describe high-pitched cries filled with despair, while others hear deep, guttural shouts, as if someone is stuck between worlds. The screams don't always seem to come from a specific direction. Instead, they swirl through the air, bouncing off walls, impossible to pinpoint. One traveler recounted pulling over late one night after getting lost on back roads near the hospital. As he stepped out to check his map, he heard a scream so loud it seemed to come from just behind him. He spun around, but the grounds were empty. The sound echoed again, this time from somewhere deeper within the ruin. He didn't stay long enough to hear a third. Floating figures are another commonly reported phenomenon around Danvers. These apparitions don't behave like traditional shadow figures seen in other haunted locations. They glide effortlessly, passing through walls or disappearing in midair. Sometimes they appear human, other times they manifest as shapeless masses of light or mist. A group of urban explorers once told of seeing a figure hovering at the far end of a hallway. It was tall and thin, its outline shimmering faintly in the dim light. It drifted forward without walking, gliding silently toward them. As they raised their flashlights, the figure broke apart like smoke, drifting upward and vanishing into the ceiling. Others report seeing floating forms moving through the windows from outside. These figures often appear in what used to be patient wards or treatment rooms. A motorist driving past late at night described seeing a pale face pressed against a second-floor window, but it was too high for anyone to reach without equipment. The face stared blankly before dissolving into the darkness. The most chilling stories involve the shadowy nurses who appear only at night. These apparitions resemble former staff members, women in old-fashioned uniforms, wearing starched caps and long skirts or crisp white dresses. But something is off about them. Their eyes appear dark and hollow, their movements unnaturally smooth, and their presence sends a wave of cold air through the room. Visitors claim these nurses patrol the hallways as those still tending to long-gone patients. They glide silently past doorways, pause near corners, or stand watching anyone who enters their domain. One witness said she saw a nurse standing by an old nurse's station, hands folded neatly in front of her. When the witness tried to speak, the figure turned its head, though the motion was slow and mechanical, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Then the nurse faded into nothing. Another traveler reported encountering a nurse near the entrance of an abandoned wing. The apparition appeared solid at first, her uniform crisp and white. Her face was pale, expression neutral. But when he stepped closer, her eyes darkened into black voids, and her figure blurred around the edges before vanishing completely. Moments later, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him, soft, measured, unnervingly precise, but the hallway was empty. Danvers State Hospital carries a dark history that many believe contributes to these hauntings. Once infamous for experimental treatments like insulin shock therapy, hydrotherapy, and early forms of electroshock, the hospital became a place of suffering for countless patients. Overcrowding, understaffing, and outdated methods created an environment where screams were a daily occurrence, not a supernatural one. Many patients died within its walls, their spirits lingering in the spaces where they endured their darkest moments. Some say the floating figures are the spirits of those who died during experimental procedures, unable to find peace. Others believe the shadow nurses are echoes of staff members who work tirelessly under brutal conditions, their energies imprinted into the building's foundation. As for the screams, many think they are residual hauntings, emotional echoes looping through time, trapped forever. Even those who don't enter the building feel its presence. Travelers driving past at night report seeing strange lights flickering in the upper windows. Others hear faint cries, even with their windows rolled up. Some feel an overwhelming dread wash over them as they approach the grounds, a visceral warning to stay away. Despite its partial redevelopment, Danvers remains a place where the past feels dangerously close to the present. The screams that echo through empty corridors, the floating figures drifting through forgotten rooms, and the shadowy nurses who appear without warning all paint a chilling picture of a hospital where suffering left an indelible mark. For those who dare to explore its haunted reputation, one truth remains constant: Danvers State Hospital is a place where the echoes of history are alive and they are anything but silent. Oklahoma State Hospital in Norman has stood for more than a century, its brick walls weathered by time, storms, and the many lives that pass through its doors. Though it has not been fully operational for years, a skeletal crew still patrols its grounds, maintaining certain wings for archives and research. But what draws the most attention are not the old medical files or abandoned wards. It is the overwhelming sense that something else lives here, something that refuses to leave. Former patients, according to countless witnesses, still roam the hospital's shadowy hallways, forever retracing the steps of the lives they once knew. Staff who work late shifts claim the building feels wrong after sundown. The temperature drops sharply, even in the summer months, and a heavy stillness settles over the wards. In the administrative archives, where dusty cabinets hold decades of forgotten files, workers often hear phantom footsteps pacing the corridor outside. The footfalls echo loudly, too heavy and deliberate to be rodents or settling pipes. Yet every time someone checks the hallway, no one is there. The footsteps usually continue once the door is shut again, as if invisible eyes watch from the shadows, waiting for the living to stop interfering. In one abandoned wing, a former nurse who stayed late to finish paperwork recounted seeing a figure standing in an empty patient room. She had heard a soft, shuffling sound, like someone moving barefoot across linoleum. Expecting a lost visitor or a trespasser, she approached the doorway and peeked inside. What she saw froze her in place. A tall man dressed in what looked like a faded hospital gown, his back turned, shoulders stiff. She cleared her throat to get his attention, and the figure slowly turned his head toward her. His face was indistinct, blurry like an out-of-focus photograph, and his eyes were two hollow pits of gray. Before she could shout or step back, the figure dissolved into thin air. The nurse left her job shortly after. Security officers share similar stories. During routine patrols, they pass by rooms where lights flicker, even though the power to those floors has been disconnected for years. When they try to log the anomalies, their radios fall silent or burst with static. One officer described hearing voices whispering from the darkness near the old therapy wing. The whispers were frantic at first, rising and falling like multiple conversations overlapping. He yelled into the void, thinking maybe someone was hiding. The whispers stopped, replaced by a single soft voice behind him that said, "Help me." He spun around, flashlight raised, but nothing stood there. The beam illuminated only peeling paint and broken tiles. But the officer said he felt a cold breath brush his ear as he fled the corridor. Maintenance workers who venture into the hospital's underground tunnels once used to move supplies and laundry report some of the most chilling encounters. These tunnels run for hundreds of feet, silent except for dripping water and distant hums from old machinery. One worker was repairing wiring when he heard the sound of a wheelchair rolling toward him. The wheels squeaked loudly, echoing through the tunnel. He turned on his light and aimed it down the passageway, expecting to see someone approaching. The tunnel was empty. The squeaking grew louder, surrounding him. He sprinted back toward the stairs, not daring to look behind him. When he reached the exit, the sound stopped instantly, as if it had never existed. Some legends surrounding Oklahoma State Hospital date back decades. Former staff from the mid-20th century wrote anonymously about the emotional heaviness of the place. They described patients who had died suddenly, others who vanished during storms, and some whose final days were marked by fear and confusion. A few believed that these patients had become permanently attached to the hospital, unable to move on due to the trauma they experienced. Whether or not these stories were exaggerations or misunderstood memories, the building itself seems to carry the weight of past tragedies. One long-standing rumor involves the old isolation ward. Visitors and investigators often report seeing figures standing at the ends of hallways, watching quietly. These figures appear only briefly, just long enough to be noticed before fading into the walls. Several paranormal teams set up cameras in the ward, hoping to capture evidence. One group claimed to record a shadowy form drifting from bed to bed, pausing as if examining something unseen. In another room, a faint voice was captured on audio, whispering, "Don't leave me." The team left the building shaken, saying the emotional energy in that wing felt oppressive and overwhelming. Even daytime shifts are not free from strange experiences. A volunteer archivist once heard someone whisper her name as she sorted old files. She assumed it was a coworker, but no one was nearby. Another time, she felt someone tug lightly on her sleeve, yet she was alone in the room. She described the hospital as a place where the past never stays silent, where the memories of those who suffered still reach toward the living. Perhaps the most unsettling experience comes from a night guard who encountered what he called the hallway watcher. He was patrolling the third floor when he saw a woman standing far down the corridor. She wore a white hospital gown and had long dark hair obscuring her face. Thinking someone had broken in, he called out to her. She did not move. He approached, stepping carefully. The woman remained still, her head tilted slightly as if listening. When he was only 20 feet away, she lifted her head, revealing a face with no eyes and smooth, pale skin. Before he could react, she vanished. The guard quit within a week. To this day, employees insist that Oklahoma State Hospital is never truly quiet. The building seems to breathe, its old pipes groaning, its doors creaking at odd hours. But beneath the natural sounds lies something deeper, a constant sense of being watched, followed, or whispered to by unseen presences. Whether these spirits are seeking help, reenacting their final moments, or simply unable to break their connection to the place. One thing is certain. The hospital remains alive with echoes of the past. Those who enter often leave with stories they never forget, reminders that some tragedies linger long after life has ended. The Ohio State Asylum for the Insane has stood on the outskirts of town for more than a century, a hulking structure of brick and stone that once housed thousands of patients. Today, most of the asylum has been left to rot, with its paint peeling, its windows shattered, and its hallways cloaked in silence. Yet, despite the emptiness, those who enter swear they are never truly alone. Visitors, urban explorers, and even law enforcement officers report ghostly apparitions in the hallways. Sudden cold spots that cut through the air like knives, and shadowy figures resembling long-lost patients drifting through locked wards. It is a place where the past refuses to rest. The asylum's history is steeped in sorrow. Built in the late 1800s to accommodate individuals with mental illness, it quickly became overcrowded, understaffed, and overwhelmed. Patients lived in cramped quarters, many left untreated or subjected to therapies that are now considered barbaric. The walls absorbed decades of suffering cries, echoing through the halls at night. Confusion and fear lingering in dimly lit wards. When the hospital finally shut its doors, the remaining staff insisted they could still feel the weight of all that anguish, as if the building itself had a memory. Even before the asylum officially closed, rumors of strange happenings circulated among employees. Nurses claimed they saw silhouettes drifting past the doorways during overnight rounds. Orderlies reported hearing footsteps behind them in empty corridors, the sound stopping the moment they turned around. After the last patient was transferred out, these reports only grew more intense. The building, some say, woke up once the living left. Today, the asylum attracts curious explorers who enter through broken windows or rusted side doors. Many tell nearly identical stories. They walk through the admitting area silent, except for the wind slipping through cracks, and feel the temperature drop without warning. What was once a stale, warm hallway becomes freezing in an instant, their breath visible in the air. Some leave at that point, unsettled by the sudden shift. Others press deeper into the building, determined to see what lies ahead. One visitor recalled walking through what used to be the female ward. The corridor was long and lined with rooms containing metal bed frames, many still bolted to the floors. As he scanned the area with his flashlight, he noticed something in the distance, a faint, pale form standing at the far end of the hallway. At first, he thought it was another explorer, but as he approached, the figure didn't move. It stood unnaturally still, like a statue. When he reached halfway down the corridor, the figure suddenly slid sideways into a closed room, as if passing through the door instead of opening it. The visitor ran out of the asylum and never returned. Law enforcement officers have also reported eerie encounters. Occasionally, they must sweep the abandoned building after receiving calls about trespassers or suspicious activity. One officer described searching the East Wing, a section known for its rusted restraints and padded isolation rooms. As he approached a locked ward door, he heard soft, shuffling footsteps from inside. He called out, warning whoever was in there that the police were present. The room went silent. He tried the doorknob, was bolted shut, with a heavy lock that hadn't been opened in years. Yet he swore he heard someone breathing on the other side, their breaths shallow and rapid. Another officer shared a chilling experience from the old hydrotherapy room. He was scanning the area with his flashlight when he caught a glimpse of a shadowy form crouched beside one of the long-abandoned tubs. The shadow lifted its head, revealing the faint outline of a face. But instead of eyes, the officer saw two dark voids staring back at him. The figure dissolved before he could react, leaving him shaking and struggling to steady his flashlight. Those who explore the asylum's upper floors often experience the most intense activity. The fourth floor, once used for patients deemed too unpredictable for the lower wards, is particularly notorious. People who venture up there report hearing whispers emerging from the darkness. The whispers are rarely clear, more like fragments of conversations or disjointed pleas. Sometimes, the voices sound desperate, repeating the same words over and over. One group recorded audio that captured a faint "please don't" spoken directly behind them, even though no one else was nearby. The locked wards are a focal point for many of the sightings. Despite the rusted locks and heavy chains that seal them, visitors claim to see shadowy figures inside the rooms, figures that pace back and forth, as if trapped in a loop of forgotten memories. One particularly terrifying account comes from a paranormal investigator who set up a camera outside one of the sealed rooms. When he reviewed the footage, he saw a silhouette pressed against a small observation window, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. The figure's hand appeared to slide down the glass, leaving no physical trace but visible on the recording. He swears the ward was completely empty when he was there. Cold spots are another constant phenomenon throughout the asylum. These pockets of freezing air can appear anywhere inside rooms, along stairwells, even beside people as they walk. One woman described feeling someone grab her hand in a cold grip, only to find the room empty. Another explorer claimed that while climbing a staircase, a wave of cold air rushed past him, accompanied by the sound of someone sobbing softly. Perhaps the most unsettling reports involve the main hallway near the old nurses' station. Visitors say they occasionally see fleeting apparitions, transparent figures in outdated patient clothing, wandering the corridor. These apparitions move slowly, often hunched or limping, and disappear the moment they are noticed. Some appear so solid that explorers mistake them for real people until they fade into nothingness. Though the Ohio State Asylum for the Insane has been abandoned for decades, its reputation as one of the state's most haunted sites remains firmly intact. Those who brave its dark corridors often leave with a lingering sense of being watched, followed, or touched by something unseen, whether these are remnants of suffering souls, memories trapped in the structure, or manifestations of the asylum's tragic history. The encounters are impossible to forget. Inside these decaying walls, the past is not dead, it waits in the shadows, ready to reveal itself to anyone who dares to step inside. Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital in New Jersey stands as one of the state's most chilling reminders of a time when mental health treatment was more confinement than care. Once a massive institution capable of housing thousands, its towering stone walls and sprawling wings now sit abandoned, slowly being reclaimed by nature and time. But even in its decay, Greystone refuses to be silent. Locals speak of haunting screams echoing across the property long after the last patients left, lights flickering in wings without electricity, and phantom figures wandering the darkened halls at night. Too many, the hospital feels alive, breathing, watching, remembering. The history of Greystone is one built on equal parts hope and tragedy. founded in the late 1800s with the promise of a more humane environment for the mentally ill. It quickly became overcrowded and burdened with suffering. Patients who arrived seeking help instead found themselves lost in a maze of dim corridors, locked rooms, and underfunded wards. As decades passed, stories of mistreatment, isolation, and experimental therapies became woven into the identity of the place. When Greystone finally closed, the grounds seemed to carry the sorrow of all who had passed through its doors. To this day, visitors swear that sorrow still lingers and sometimes screams. One of the most commonly reported phenomena is the sound of haunting cries drifting from the upper floors. Residents who live near the old hospital claim that, on quiet nights, the wind carries distant wails across the fields. These screams rise and fall, like someone calling out for help, only to vanish without explanation. Some believe the cries come from spirits reliving their final, anguished moments. Others think the building itself has absorbed the pain of countless patients and releases it in echoes. Whatever the cause, the screams are unmistakable and chilling enough to make even skeptics stop and listen. Inside the building, the atmosphere becomes even more unsettling. The hallways stretch endlessly, their floors covered in dust and debris, their walls marred by peeling paint. The silence is heavy, broken only by the occasional drip of water from damaged ceilings. Explorers who venture into the abandoned wings often report seeing lights flicker down long corridors, despite the fact that the building has no functional power. Sometimes the lights pulse rhythmically, as if following an unseen pattern. Other times, a room will briefly illuminate, casting shadows that dance across the floor before plunging into darkness again. Those who witness these flickers say they feel targeted, as though something is toying with them, guiding them deeper into the maze. There is one hallway in particular that locals warn explorers to avoid. Known informally as the Pulse Corridor, it runs through one of the hospital's most neglected wings. People who walk through it claim the lights flicker in time with their footsteps, as if responding to their presence. A paranormal team that investigated the area captured footage showing a light turning on at the far end, staying bright for several seconds, then abruptly shutting off just before their camera malfunctioned. When they reached the spot where the light had appeared, the fixture was shattered, its wiring completely disconnected. Phantom figures are another common sight within Greystone's walls. Visitors describe seeing silhouettes standing at the ends of hallways, watching silently before slipping around corners. Only when approached do they fade away, dissolving into thin air. Others are described as translucent, gliding across doorways without disturbing a sound. A few are seen wearing old patient gowns, their outlines warped and trembling, as if caught between the past and the present. One of the most unsettling encounters involves a figure known to locals as the Night Walker. He is often described as a tall, lanky shadow that moves at an unnatural pace, gliding rather than walking. People claim he roams the hallways after midnight, appearing suddenly at the end of a corridor before vanishing in the blink of an eye. A former security guard shared a story about patrolling the grounds late one night when he saw the figure standing under a broken light fixture. The shadow seemed to stretch across the hallway, growing longer and darker until it nearly touched him. When the guard shined his flashlight directly at it, the figure collapsed into the darkness like smoke. He quit the job soon after. Another chilling report comes from a pair of explorers who ventured into the former patient recreation room. As they scanned the area with their flashlights, they noticed a woman standing near a boarded window, her white gown smeared with dust. They assumed she was a fellow explorer until she turned and revealed a pale, expressionless face with hollow eyes. The woman lifted her hand as if reaching toward them, and without making a sound, drifted backward into the wall. The pair ran out, leaving behind their equipment, which they refused to retrieve. Temperature fluctuations only add to the eerie atmosphere. Many visitors describe feeling sudden chills sweep through rooms that moments before were warm. Some feel cold breath on the back of their necks, only to turn and find no one there. A few report hearing whispers in these cold spots, short, fragmented words spoken in low tones. These whispers often seem to follow them, growing louder as they move deeper into the building. One paranormal investigator recounted an experience in the old treatment wing. As he set up his equipment, he heard the faint sound of a woman humming. The humming echoed down the corridor, soft but steady. When he followed the sound, it drifted from room to room, always staying just out of reach. Eventually, the humming stopped abruptly, replaced by a single, sharp scream that reverberated through the halls. The investigator later said that the scream felt directed at him, filled with a sense of warning or despair. Even outside the building, Greystone's presence is impossible to ignore. On foggy nights, people driving past the grounds claim to see silhouettes standing in the windows, their forms faint and unmoving. Some appear to press their hands against the glass, as though trying to escape. Others simply watch, their eyes following passing cars. Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital remains one of New Jersey's most chilling landmarks. With its disturbing history and countless ghostly encounters, it continues to draw those curious enough, for brave enough, to face the shadows that linger within its walls. The screams, the flickering lights, and the phantom figures are reminders that not every story ends when the doors close. In the darkness of Greystone, the past walks freely, and the dead are never far behind. Norristown State Hospital in Pennsylvania stands as a vestige of a bygone era, its aging brick buildings and sprawling grounds carrying the weight of more than a penitentiary of stories, some whispered, some forgotten, and some that refuse to remain silent. Though much of the hospital still operates in a limited capacity, several of its older wings sit abandoned, sealed off from the public and left to decay. It is in these forgotten halls that the strange events occur. Witnesses who venture too close describe figures in old patient gowns drifting through shadows, unexplained cold drafts sweeping across empty rooms, and disembodied voices repeating fragments of long-forgotten conversations. Too many, Norristown feels like a place where time folds in on itself, trapping echoes of the past that still play out in the present. The hospital was established in the late 1800s as an ambitious attempt to reform mental health treatment. It grew into a massive complex with numerous buildings, each dedicated to different forms of care, some compassionate, some experimental. Over the decades, treatments evolved, patients came and went, and the hospital slowly shifted from a bustling medical institution to a quieter, more somber presence. But as human activity lessened, something else seemed to emerge. Workers who maintained the grounds after the wards were closed noticed unusual things: doors creaking open without a breeze, footsteps in buildings believed empty, and strange murmurs drifting from behind locked doors. One of the most common reports involves figures in patient gowns wandering the restricted wings. These figures are often seen out of the corner of the eye, slipping silently across hallways or vanishing behind doorways that lead to sealed rooms. A maintenance worker described an encounter while doing routine checks near the old women's ward. He saw a woman standing at the far end of the hallway, her gown yellowed with age, her hair tangled. She stared straight ahead, unmoving. When he called out to her, she turned not with a normal motion, but in a slow, gliding shift, as though her feet never touched the floor. Before he could take another step, she faded into the wall behind her. The hallway remained empty, but the worker left his tools behind and refused to return alone. Another chilling phenomenon is the presence of sudden cold drafts. Even during the warmest months, certain corridors feel icy, the temperature dropping dramatically with no explanation. These cold pockets travel unpredictably, sometimes brushing past a person like a fleeting presence, other times lingering in a room for minutes at a time. One former security guard recalled walking through a wing where the air felt normal until he reached the third door on the right. Suddenly, the temperature plunged so fast that he could see his breath. The cold pressed in around him, accompanied by a faint impression that someone was standing inches away. When he stepped back, the cold receded. When he stepped forward again, it returned, wrapping around him like an invisible figure. He described the sensation as walking straight into a memory that didn't belong to me. But perhaps the most unnerving experiences at Norristown involve the voices, persistent, whispering, looping voices repeating pieces of conversations from long ago. Investigators who have recorded audio in the abandoned wards often capture these murmurs. Some sound like patients chatting softly, their words blurred and indistinct. Others are clearer, replaying the same sentence or phrase again and again, as though stuck in an endless loop. One team captured a chilling recording in a former group therapy room. On playback, they heard three distinct voices. The first asked, "Why won't they listen?" The second voice responded with a soft giggle. The third repeated, "Not again, not again," over and over until the audio cut out. People who visit the old occupational therapy building report hearing these voices even without equipment. Explorers tell of walking through the long, empty space and hearing their names whispered behind them. Some hear conversations happening in rooms that have been locked for decades. When they approach, the voices stop abruptly, leaving behind only an oppressive silence. One of the most disturbing reports comes from a social worker who stayed late one evening to finish paperwork. As she walked through one of the older corridors to reach the parking lot, she heard two people talking behind a door that she knew led to a sealed-off ward. The conversation sounded casual, almost cheerful, curious and concerned. She knocked. The voices instantly went silent. She tried the handle, but it didn't budge. Thinking she might be imagining things, she stepped back only for the voices to resume, louder this time, repeating the same words in the same tone as before. Feeling an overwhelming unease, she left quickly, and from that day forward refused to walk that hallway alone after sunset. Another encounter took place in the former administrative wing, where most of the office furniture had long since been removed. A volunteer archivist, sorting through old records, felt someone tug lightly on the sleeve of her sweater. When she turned, she saw a figure in a faded hospital gown standing in the doorway. The figure appeared translucent, its facial features blurred like smudged ink. It raised one arm as if pointing to something behind her. When she looked back at the doorway, the figure had dissolved completely. Moments later, she felt a cold draft sweep through the room, lifting the papers on her desk and scattering them across the floor. Outside the buildings, the hauntings continue. Groundskeepers say they have seen figures walking along the pathways at night, their movements slow and dreamlike. Some vanish behind trees, others simply disappear mid. Drivers passing by the property report glimpses of pale faces staring out from darkened windows, as though the spirits are still watching the living world continue without them. Norristown State Hospital remains one of Pennsylvania's most unsettling locations, precisely because its hauntings feel so tied to the human stories of those who lived and suffered there. The figures in patient gowns, the cold drafts, and the looping voices suggest that the past has not lifted from these grounds. Instead, it lingers, retreating, returning, in the shadows of Norristown's empty halls. The echoes of unfinished stories continue to unfold, waiting for anyone who steps close enough to listen. Letchworth Village, hidden deep in the wooded hills of New York, remains one of the most unsettling remnants of America's institutional past. Once intended as a humane facility for individuals with developmental disabilities, the institution quickly descended into neglect, overcrowding, and tragic mistreatment. When it finally closed, the buildings were abandoned and left to decay. Today, travelers, urban explorers, and even locals who pass by the grounds describe eerie encounters, shadowy figures gliding through the overgrown courtyards, disembodied laughter echoing through crumbling hallways, and heavy doors that open and close on their own. For many, Letchworth Village feels like a place frozen in time, haunted not only by ghosts but by the weight of its own history. The village was built in the early 20th century as a revolutionary alternative to city-run institutions. Instead of a single massive building, Letchworth consisted of dozens of small cottages spread across sprawling farmland. The idea was to give residents a more peaceful, rural life. But as the decades passed, the population ballooned, staffing dwindled, and living conditions deteriorated rapidly. Reports of neglect grew. Children were photographed lying on cold floors, unused equipment rusted in corners, and the wards became places of silent suffering. When the institution finally closed, the land seemed to exhale, leaving behind buildings scarred by everything they had witnessed. Visitors who approach Letchworth often speak first of the atmosphere as strange. Heavy feeling that settles over the property. Even on bright afternoons, the air feels unnaturally still. The pathways, cracked and swallowed by weeds, lead to cottages with gaping doorways and collapsed roofs. Windows are shattered, leaving jagged openings that resemble staring eyes. Those who enter describe an immediate shift, as if they have stepped into a memory that refuses to fade. Shadowy figures are among the most commonly reported phenomena. These dark shapes appear in the corner of the eye or linger deep within hallways. One traveler recounted walking past the old hospital building at dusk. Out of the corner of his vision, he noticed someone standing near a broken window. When he turned, the figure, tall, thin, with indistinct features, slipped backward into the building with inhuman speed. The man followed the path to the doorway, but inside the room was empty, filled only with peeling paint and decaying plaster. He left quickly, sensing that someone or something was watching him from the shadows. Another visitor, a photographer, exploring the grounds early one morning, snapped dozens of pictures of the cottages. When reviewing the images later, she noticed a dark outline in one window and elongated silhouette that hadn't been there when she took the photo. The figure appeared to be leaning slightly forward, as if observing her. When she returned to the spot to investigate, the building was silent, dust covering the floor undisturbed. Yet the presence she felt that morning stayed with her long after she left. Disembodied laughter is also frequently heard across the property. Some describe it as the soft giggle of a child. Others hear multiple voices, as if an unseen group is sharing a private joke. The laughter is almost always brief, echoing for only a moment before disappearing into the empty rooms. One explorer walking through the old school building heard what sounded like children running behind him, their footsteps light and quick. When he turned, the hallway remained empty, but the sound of laughter, bright, cheerful, completely out of place, drifted from a classroom ahead. He approached cautiously, but before he reached the door, the laughter stopped, replaced by a faint, lingering hum. One of the most unsettling experiences reported at Letchworth Village involves the doors. Heavy metal doors, long rusted in place, are said to open and close with no physical cause. An urban exploration group recorded footage of a thick door swinging shut with tremendous force as they passed through a ward. There was no breeze, no one behind them, and no mechanical reason for it to move. The slam echoed through the hall like a warning. The group fled, only to hear another door creak open as they ran, as though the building itself was reacting to their presence. In another account, a pair of travelers ventured into the administrative building. While exploring an office lined with old filing cabinets, they heard a soft click behind them. Turning around, they saw the door they had entered closing slowly, as if pushed by an invisible hand. Seconds later, it swung open again, stopping inches from the wall without making a sound. The movement was gentle, almost deliberate, like someone examining whether they should be allowed to stay. Temperature changes also play a role in many encounters. Visitors describe sudden cold spots, where the air becomes frigid, as if something unseen has passed through. In one cottage, a man exploring alone said the temperature dropped so drastically that he could see his breath. Moments later, he heard faint whispering in the room behind him. When he turned, he saw a dark shape crouched in the corner. The figure rose slowly, its form flickering like smoke, before dissolving entirely. The man ran from the cottage without looking back. Some of the most chilling stories come from those who walk the grounds after sundown. On moonless nights, the shadows deepen into impenetrable pools of darkness. Travelers have reported seeing figures move between the cottages, their shapes not quite human, too tall, too thin, or moving with unsettling smoothness. One driver parked near the main road said he saw a shadowy figure glide across the property, its motion steady and silent. When he blinked, the figure vanished, only to appear again several yards away, as if teleporting through the dark. Letchworth Village's dark history lingers in every cracked wall and abandoned room. The spirits or impressions left behind seem to echo the fear, confusion, and loneliness of residents who once lived there. The shadowy figures, the laughter that doesn't belong, the doors that move of their own accord serve as reminders that the past has not fully released this place. For those who visit, Letchworth Village is more than an abandoned institution. It is a haunting, living memory, where echoes of suffering and fragments of forgotten lives continue to manifest in chilling ways. In the silence of its empty halls and the darkness of its crumbling rooms, the unseen world watches, and sometimes it lets itself be seen. St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., stands as one of the nation's oldest psychiatric institutions, a sprawling complex of brick buildings and long, empty corridors. Founded in the mid-19th century, it was once hailed as a model facility for the treatment of mental illness. But over the decades, overcrowding, outdated therapies, and tragedies left a heavy mark on the institution. Even decades after parts of it have fallen into disuse, visitors and urban explorers insist that the building is far from empty. Ghostly patients are reported wandering the halls. Anguished screams echo through vacant rooms, and apparitions appear in areas once used for treatment and therapy. The hospital's reputation as one of the most haunted locations in the nation has only grown over the years. Approaching St. Elizabeth's, visitors often note an oppressive feeling in the air. The hospital's massive wings stretch out in a series of interconnected buildings, some of which remain in use, while others have been sealed off and left to decay. The outer grounds are overgrown, with cracked walkways and rusted fencing, and the silence around the complex feels unnatural. Even on bright afternoons, there is a sense that the past lingers, just out of reach, waiting for anyone who steps too close. Inside the abandoned wings, the atmosphere grows heavier. The floors creak underfoot, and peeling paint falls from high ceilings. Dust motes float in shafts of sunlight, but shadows seem to linger where the light cannot reach. Visitors describe hearing ghostly footsteps behind them in corridors that should be empty. Sometimes the steps move in rhythm with their own. Other times they are erratic, darting from one end of the hallway to the other. When explorers turn, expecting to see someone, they find nothing but the decaying walls and the remnants of long-forgotten furniture. Many of the most chilling reports come from former treatment areas. Rooms that once held therapy, equipment, medical tools, or patient beds are now derelict. But some visitors insist they can see the faint outlines of figures moving among the debris. A paranormal investigator described entering one such room, only to see a shadow shift across the floor as if a person had walked past. He turned, but the space was empty. Moments later, he felt a cold presence brush past him, sending a shiver down his spine. When he reviewed footage from his camera, a translucent figure appeared standing near the center of the room, vanishing just as he approached. Screams are another persistent phenomenon at St. Elizabeth's. Visitors often report hearing loud, high-pitched cries echoing through hallways and stairwells. The sounds are unnerving, rising and falling in volume, as if carried on some invisible current. One visitor recounted walking through the old patient dormitories when a sudden scream erupted from behind a closed door. She froze, but when she checked, the room was empty. The echo lingered, bouncing from wall to wall, fading gradually into silence. Others have described hearing multiple screams at once, layered over each other in a haunting cacophony that seems to come from all directions at once. Ghostly patients are seen most often in the larger corridors and dormitory wings. Witnesses describe seeing figures in outdated hospital attire, loose gowns, or patient robes gliding silently across rooms or hallways. Some appear solid at first, with discernible features and movements, but dissolve into shadows when approached. One explorer reported seeing a man sitting on a long-forgotten bed, his head bowed. As she stepped closer, he slowly looked up, his face blurred and indistinct, and then he vanished entirely. The sense of being watched persisted long after she left the room. St. Elizabeth's is also known for its strange environmental phenomena. Sudden cold spots can grip entire sections of a wing, leaving visitors shivering in air that is otherwise warm. Doors open and close with no explanation, sometimes gently swinging, other times slamming shut with force. Lights flicker in rooms where electricity has long been disconnected. In some cases, visitors hear whispers, fragmented conversations that repeat in loops. like echoes of old therapy sessions or private patient moments. These whispers are faint but unmistakable, often stopping abruptly when someone calls out. One particularly disturbing account comes from a late-night visitor exploring the hospital's original psychiatric ward. As he moved through a long corridor, he noticed a figure in a faded hospital gown standing at the far end. The figure remained still, but when he approached, he could see it was unnervingly tall and thin, with shadows obscuring its face. Before he could reach it, the figure seemed to glide backward into a closed room, passing through the door as though it were nothing more than air. Moments later, a distant, piercing scream echoed through the corridor, leaving him frozen in place before he ran from the building. Even outside the hospital, the presence of the past can be felt. Those driving past at night report seeing figures in upper windows or shadows crossing the grounds. Some claim to see light flickering in rooms that are otherwise abandoned, or to hear faint footsteps on empty walkways. The grounds themselves seem to hold the memory of decades of human suffering, a persistent, invisible weight that cannot be shaken. For decades, St. Elizabeth's Hospital has been a place where the boundaries between the living and the past feel thin. The ghostly patients wandering the halls, the screams echoing through empty rooms. The apparitions in former treatment areas all point to a lingering energy tied to the hospital's dark history. The building is more than a relic of medical history. It is a repository of memory, pain, and unspoken stories. Those who step into its abandoned wings often leave with more than photographs or curiosity. They leave with a sense that the hospital remembers, that the past is still very much alive, and that the echoes of St. Elizabeth's patients will not be ignored. Nevada State Hospital, located just outside Carson City, stands as one of the state's most chilling remnants of a once thriving mental health institution. Founded in the late 19th century, it was intended to provide care for the mentally ill. But over decades, it became overcrowded, understaffed, and infamous for its harsh treatments. Today, much of the hospital sits abandoned, its brick walls weathered, its hallways silent and decaying. Yet for those who venture onto the grounds, silence is deceptive. Locals, urban explorers, and occasional night patrols all report ghostly activity. Phantom nurses gliding through corridors, shadowy figures standing motionless in abandoned wings, and disembodied voices calling out from empty rooms. Nevada State Hospital has become a place where the past refuses to rest, lingering in the shadows and echoing through crumbling walls. Even from the outside, the hospital has an imposing presence. Its towering brick structures, many of them with shattered windows and ivy-clad walls, seem to loom over the surrounding landscape. The grounds, once neatly maintained, have been overtaken by weeds and cracked pavement. Those who pass by at night often report a sense of unease, an inexplicable weight in the air that seems to press down on anyone who approaches. Some swear they have seen fleeting shapes moving behind darkened windows or lights turning on in buildings long abandoned. Inside the hospital, the stories become even more unnerving. Visitors report phantom nurses appearing in the hallways, dressed in uniforms from decades past. These figures move gracefully, almost floating, their features often blurred or indistinct. One urban explorer recalled walking through the main corridor when he saw a woman in a white nurse's dress standing near a room where patient records were once kept. She seemed to be examining the air, as if checking on invisible patients. As he approached, she turned slowly, her face obscured by shadow, and vanished before he could reach her. The sense of being watched lingered long after she disappeared. Figures standing silently in hallways are another common phenomenon. Many witnesses describe seeing tall, shadowy shapes in the distance, often at the end of long corridors. One visitor recounted exploring the old male ward and seeing a figure standing motionless beneath a flickering light. When he called out, the figure didn't move, and when he stepped closer, it vanished as though it had melted into the walls. Others report glimpsing shapes in rooms that should be empty, figures that appear and disappear without warning. The presence of these silent watchers creates a constant tension, as though the hospital itself is alive with memory and observation. Voices echoing through the abandoned wings are perhaps the most unsettling. Explorers describe hearing names being called, whispers of conversations, and even fragmented phrases from decades past. One paranormal investigator, recording audio in the isolation wing, captured faint murmurs of a nurse instructing a patient, followed by a low, distressed voice responding. When the team entered the room, it was empty, yet the air felt charged, heavy with energy that seemed to cling to the walls. These vocal phenomena are rarely continuous. They appear and vanish unpredictably, heightening the sense that the hospital remembers every word ever spoken within its walls. Cold spots are another frequent occurrence. Many report sudden drops in temperature that sweep across a corridor or fill a room, chilling the air to near freezing levels. One night guard described walking through an old therapy wing when the temperature plummeted so rapidly that he could see his breath. At the same time, he heard the unmistakable sound of someone walking behind him. When he turned, the hallway was empty, but the sensation of being followed persisted until he left the building. Doors in the hospital often seem to have a will of their own. Heavy metal doors, long rusted and decrepit, are reported to open and close without cause. Some swing gently as if pushed by a phantom hand. Others slam with startling force. One exploration group described a scene in which a door to an old patient room opened slowly on its own as they passed, remaining ajar just long enough for a shadow to appear in the gap. When they returned to the spot later, the door was closed and unyielding, as if it had never moved. In some of the older wings, investigators report seeing fleeting apparitions performing everyday tasks. A nurse folding linens, a figure wheeling an imaginary cart down the hallway, or a patient pacing restlessly in a padded room. These apparitions are often so lifelike that at first they are mistaken for trespassers, but when approached, they dissolve into thin air, leaving only echoes of footsteps or soft sighs behind. Visitors consistently describe a feeling of lingering sadness, an oppressive weight of memory tied to the pain and isolation once endured within these walls. Even the hospital's exterior can be unsettling. On foggy nights, locals claim to see shadowy figures moving across the grounds, or the flicker of lights in windows that have long been boarded shut. Some report hearing cries or laughter carried on the wind, distant but unmistakably human. Drivers passing the area occasionally slow, unnerved by the feeling of eyes watching them from the darkness beyond the road. Nevada State Hospital remains a magnet for those drawn to the paranormal, and its reputation continues to grow with each account of eerie sightings and unexplained phenomena. The phantom nurses, the figures standing silently in hallways, the voices that echo through abandoned wings, they all suggest that the past refuses to leave this place behind. It is as though the building itself holds the memories of every patient, every staff member, every moment of fear or hope that ever occurred within its walls. To those who step inside, Nevada State Hospital is more than a historical site. It is a place where the boundary between the living and the past seems thin, where echoes of former lives manifest in the shadows, and where the building itself seems to remember everything that happened within its corridors. Those who enter often leave with more than photographs or curiosity. They leave with a sense that the hospital's restless spirits are still very much present, watching, waiting, and unwilling to be forgotten. Craig Colony, nestled in the quiet hills of New York, is a place where history and haunting converge. Established in the early 20th century as a residential facility for individuals with developmental disabilities, Craig Colony was intended as a refuge, a place of care and rehabilitation. Yet over the decades, overcrowding, neglect, and tragic mismanagement transformed the facility into a site of sorrow and despair. Today, much of Craig Colony sits abandoned, its brick buildings crumbling, and its once manicured grounds overtaken by weeds and vines. But the property is far from lifeless. Visitors, urban explorers, and locals alike report unnerving phenomena: shadowy figures resembling long-departed patients, objects that move without explanation, and the faint, haunting echo of voices in empty wards. The past lingers here, pressing against the walls and ceilings, refusing to be forgotten. From the outside, the atmosphere is already unnerving. The sprawling complex stretches across a series of gentle hills, with long corridors and connected buildings that seem endless. Broken windows stare blankly like eyes into the overgrown landscape, and the silence that envelops the grounds is heavy, almost suffocating. Some locals claim that even during bright afternoons, the air around the colony carries a chill, as though it remembers the suffering and fear of generations past. Visitors report feeling watched before they even step through the thresholds of the abandoned buildings. Inside, the sense of unease intensifies. The corridors are long and dimly lit, lined with peeling paint and decaying floorboards. Dust hangs in the air, disturbed only by the movement of explorers' footsteps. Many witnesses speak of seeing shadowy figures out of the corners of their eyes, tall, thin shapes that move silently and disappear when confronted directly. One urban explorer described walking through a patient dormitory when he noticed a figure standing at the far end of a hallway, its posture slumped, as if weighed down by years of suffering. When he moved closer, the figure seemed to shift into the walls themselves, vanishing completely, leaving behind only a lingering sense of despair. Floating objects are another phenomenon reported by those who venture into Craig Colony. Chairs, medical carts, and even doors are said to move on their own, sometimes sliding across rooms without a sound, other times tipping over suddenly with startling force. A group of paranormal investigators recounted an experience in a therapy room where an old wheelchair began to rock slowly back and forth, as if occupied by someone invisible. As they watched, the wheelchair slid toward the center of the room, stopping just inches from them. No breeze, no mechanism, and no one was present. The sense of unseen activity left the team shaken, and several members refused to enter the building again. Voices of distress are perhaps the most chilling element of the Craig Colony hauntings. Visitors often report hearing faint murmurs, fragmented conversations, or anguished cries echoing through abandoned wards. One visitor recounted wandering through the old isolation wing when she heard a soft but urgent whisper, "Help me, please." The voice seemed to come from every corner at once, fading as she approached the room, only to reappear moments later from a different direction. Others describe hearing multiple voices overlapping, like a chorus of pain replaying memories that never found closure. These vocal echoes are often accompanied by sudden cold spots, sending chills through anyone nearby and intensifying the feeling of being watched. The dormitories and wards are central to many of the reported encounters. Explorers often find themselves in rooms that appear perfectly ordinary at first glance, only to notice subtle changes and objects slightly shifted, a shadow that moves independently, or the faint outline of a figure standing silently in a doorway. One man described entering a former recreation room where he saw a faint, semi-transparent figure pacing slowly along the far wall. Its movements were deliberate, almost human, yet unnervingly fluid, and when he stepped closer, it seemed to melt into the wall like smoke, leaving him gripping his flashlight tightly as he stumbled backward. Even the hallways themselves seem alive with memory. Steps echo along empty corridors, as if someone unseen is following, sometimes matching the pace of those walking through, sometimes lagging behind and then disappearing entirely. Doors creak or slam without warning, and lights, even in disconnected electrical systems, flicker sporadically, casting long, moving shadows that twist across walls and ceilings. Visitors report that the further they venture into the abandoned wings, the more the building seems to respond, reacting to their presence as though it remembers every step, every sound, every life that passed through its halls. The grounds outside Craig Colony add another layer of unease. On misty evenings, shadows appear between buildings, gliding unnaturally across the cracked walkways. Some explorers report seeing figures in patient gowns wandering aimlessly, their forms pale and indistinct, vanishing when approached. Others speak of hearing faint, rhythmic tapping, or the soft hum of voices carried on the wind, coming from areas that have been abandoned for decades. It is as if the entire property is saturated with memories of the past, memories that refuse to remain confined within the walls. Craig Colony's haunted reputation is not simply a product of imagination. The experiences of those who have visited, whether through personal encounters or recorded phenomena, point to a lingering presence rooted in history. The shadowy patience, the floating objects, the cries and whispers, they all serve as a reminder of the human suffering that took place here. The institution, abandoned as it may be, seems to hold on to those memories, replaying them for anyone who dares to enter. For those who step into Craig Colony, the experience is unforgettable. It is more than an abandoned institution. It is a living monument to a tragic past, a place where echoes of pain, confusion, and longing continue to manifest. Shadowy figures wander objects, move on their own, and voices of distress reverberate through empty halls. In the stillness of its abandoned wards, the past remains alive, and the unseen presence of those who lived and suffered here ensures that Craig Colony will never truly be silent. Taunton State Hospital in Massachusetts stands as a stark reminder of the state's complex history with mental health care. Established in the mid-19th century, it was designed as a place of treatment and refuge for the mentally ill. Yet over time, it became known for overcrowding, harsh methods, and tragic neglect. Though much of the hospital has been abandoned or repurposed, the old wings still carry an eerie presence. Visitors and explorers report unsettling experiences. Figures dressed in old patient attire wandering the hallways, phantom footsteps echoing through empty corridors, and faint whispers that seem to repeat fragments of past treatments. Taunton is a place where the past refuses to remain buried, and its haunted reputation has grown steadily over the years. The hospital's sprawling campus is imposing, even from a distance. Long brick corridors stretch through multiple wings, their windows dark and lifeless, many shattered or boarded over. The grounds, once meticulously maintained, are now overgrown, with weeds pushing through cracked walkways. Those who approach the facility often feel a strange weight in the air, as though the building itself is watching. Even on sunny afternoons, visitors report a cold, uneasy sensation, an awareness of the countless lives and stories that pass through these halls. The sense of history here is tangible, but so is the sense that something else lingers, something that is not entirely of this world. Inside, the atmosphere becomes far more unsettling. The hallways are long and narrow, lit only by stray beams of sunlight filtering through broken windows. Dust and debris cover the floors, and the peeling paint on the walls seems almost to sag under the weight of time. Many explorers report seeing figures in the corners of their eyes, dressed in outdated patient gowns or uniforms. One visitor recalled walking through the women's ward when he noticed a pale figure standing motionless at the end of the corridor. As he approached, the figure slowly turned, revealing an indistinct face, and then disappeared completely into the shadows. Moments later, he felt a cold draft sweep past him, as if the apparition had brushed against his shoulder. Phantom footsteps are another common phenomenon at Taunton. Even when hallways are empty, visitors describe hearing the echo of someone walking just ahead of them or trailing behind. Sometimes the footsteps are soft and rhythmic, like someone pacing nervously, while other times they are sudden and heavy, startling the person exploring. One security guard recounted an experience late one night when he was performing rounds in an abandoned wing. He heard footsteps on the far end of the hallway, but when he looked, the corridor was empty. As he stepped forward, the sounds moved closer, then retreated, echoing eerily through the halls. He described the sensation as the building itself breathing. Whispers of past treatments are also frequently reported. Explorers and investigators have recorded faint voices that seem to echo remnants of therapy sessions or conversations between staff and patients. One paranormal investigator described hearing a low, anxious voice repeating, "Please, don't leave me here," over and over in one of the isolation wards. Another heard instructions being given to a patient in the old occupational therapy room. The words soft but insistent, fading before they could be understood in full. These whispered fragments are disjointed but unmistakably human, a haunting reminder of the lives that once filled these spaces. Visitors have also recounted more direct apparitions. In some cases, figures appear performing tasks from long ago, almost as if replaying memories. A woman in a tattered patient gown has been seen arranging chairs in a day room, only to vanish when approached. A shadowy male figure is reported pacing in the locked treatment wing, moving with purpose but leaving no trace. These sightings are often accompanied by a sudden chill or the distinct feeling of being observed, reinforcing the sense that the hospital's past is still very much alive. Doors and windows in the abandoned wings sometimes act unpredictably. Heavy doors, long unused, are reported to creak open or shut without explanation, sometimes with startling force. Explorers have witnessed doors swinging as if pushed by invisible hands, while windows rattle with no wind to move them. The combined effect of these movements with the footsteps and whispers creates a sense of a building that is aware of its visitors, reacting to their presence, testing their courage, and perhaps warning them to leave. Even outside the hospital, the atmosphere carries a sense of haunting. On misty evenings, locals claim to see shadowy figures moving behind broken windows or crossing the overgrown lawns. Some report hearing faint cries or murmurs that seem to drift through the surrounding woods, carried on the wind. Drivers passing the property have occasionally slowed, unnerved by glimpses of movement in the empty wings or the fleeting reflection of a pale face in the glass. Taunton State Hospital's haunted reputation is not solely the product of imagination or rumor. The stories of those who have entered its halls, whether employees, visitors, or paranormal investigators, point to a lingering presence, a reflection of the countless lives and emotions that pass through the hospital. Figures in old patient attire, phantom footsteps, and whispers of past treatments serve as chilling reminders that the building is more than an empty structure. It is a repository of memory, trauma, and human experience. It remembers. For those who venture into Taunton State Hospital, the experience is unforgettable. It is more than an abandoned asylum. It is a living echo of the past, where the lines between the living and the departed blur. The figures that drift through the corridors, the sounds of unseen footsteps, and the whispers that repeat long-forgotten conversations all contribute to an atmosphere thick with history and unresolved energy. In the darkness of its decaying halls, Taunton State Hospital continues to tell the stories of those who lived, suffered, and lingered within its walls, ensuring that the past remains ever present. Anna State Hospital in southern Illinois is a place steeped in both history and haunting. Established in the late 19th century as a mental health facility, the hospital was intended to care for those struggling with psychiatric illnesses. However, over the decades, it became infamous for overcrowding, harsh treatments, and tragic neglect. Today, much of the hospital stands abandoned, its brick wings crumbling, windows shattered, and grounds overgrown. Despite the decay, the facility is far from lifeless. Locals and urban explorers alike have reported chilling phenomena. Ghostly apparitions gliding through hallways, sudden cold drafts that seem to follow invisible presences, and doors that slam or creak with no one near. Anna State Hospital carries with it the weight of its troubled past, and those who enter its walls often leave with stories that defy rational explanation. Approaching Anna State, visitors often feel an immediate sense of unease. The sprawling complex stretches across rolling grounds, with long corridors, multiple wings, and detached buildings that were once dormitories, treatment wards, and administrative offices. Even during daylight, the atmosphere feels heavy, as if the air itself is thick with memories. Many who pass the hospital claim to feel watched, or to see fleeting shapes move behind the broken windows, vanishing before they can be fully observed. By nightfall, the impression deepens, with shadows stretching unnaturally across the grounds and hallways, creating an eerie sense that the building itself is alive. Inside the abandoned wings, the chilling experiences intensify. Hallways that were once filled with the sounds of patients and staff now echo only with the footsteps of visitors. Yet even those are often joined by phantom steps that seem to follow or precede them. One urban explorer recalled walking through the male patient dormitory late in the evening when he heard a series of heavy footsteps echoing along the corridor. He stopped, turned, and found the hallway empty. As he cautiously continued, the footsteps resumed, keeping pace with him, only to abruptly cease when he reached the stairwell. He described the sensation as if the building itself was playing with him, a silent observer, aware of every move. Ghostly apparitions are perhaps the most commonly reported phenomenon. Many witnesses describe shadowy figures moving through the halls or lingering near doorways, often dressed in what appears to be old hospital attire. One visitor recounted seeing a pale figure standing near a window in a former treatment room, its features indistinct but humanoid. When he tried to approach, the figure dissolved into the air as if it had never existed. Others report seeing figures sitting in abandoned chairs, pacing corridors, or standing silently at the ends of hallways, vanishing when directly confronted. The sense is not just visual. Many report feeling the weight of presence, a cold pressure or tingling sensation, as though being touched by unseen hands. Cold drafts are another frequent occurrence, often accompanying the appearance of these apparitions. Visitors describe sudden temperature drops in certain areas, sometimes chilling the air so much that their breath becomes visible. One paranormal investigator recalled standing in a former therapy room when a wave of icy air swept across the space. At the same time, he felt an invisible presence pass by, as though someone or something had moved through him. These cold spots appear unpredictably, lingering just long enough to unsettle anyone nearby before dissipating without warning. Doors within Anna State Hospital also behave in ways that defy logic. Heavy ward doors are known to slam shut or creak open without any human intervention. Several visitors have reported walking through corridors when doors suddenly burst open, swing wide, or shut with force, often accompanied by a sudden chill. In one notable account, a group of explorers entered an abandoned administrative wing. As they moved through the hallway, a heavy metal door slowly swung open in front of them. Before they could react, it slammed shut with a deafening bang. No wind, no structural collapse, and no other people were near. The incident left them shaken, and several refused to continue exploring that night. Voices are yet another unsettling aspect of the hospital. Explorers often report faint murmurs, whispers, or cries echoing through empty wards. Some are indistinct fragments of conversation. Others sound like anguished cries or patients calling out for help. One visitor recounted hearing a soft voice repeatedly whisper, "Please, stay with me," as he walked past a long-abandoned dormitory. He froze, turning in every direction, but found no one. The whispers continued for several minutes before fading into silence, leaving him with a lingering sense of dread. Even the exterior grounds of Anna State Hospital carry an air of haunting. Locals often report seeing figures moving between buildings after dark, appearing as shadows that glide unnaturally across overgrown paths. Some hear footsteps or faint calls carried on the wind, coming from areas that have been abandoned for decades. Occasionally, lights flicker in windows of wings that no longer have electricity, or doors creak as if pushed by invisible hands. The property seems saturated with the energy of the past, replaying moments that occurred long ago. The stories of Anna State Hospital are a chilling reminder of the institution's tragic history. The ghostly apparitions, the phantom footsteps, the cold drafts, and the doors that move on their own all point to the lingering presence of those who lived, worked, and suffered within its walls. The hospital is more than a collection of abandoned buildings. It is a repository of memory and emotion, where echoes of the past manifest in ways that challenge rational explanation. For those who step inside Anna State Hospital, the experience is unforgettable. It is not simply an abandoned institution. It is a space where the past still breathes, where the presence of former patients can be felt in every corridor, and where the living can witness fragments of lives that refuse to fade. Shadowy figures drift through hallways, icy drafts sweep through rooms, and doors slam without warning, leaving visitors with the unmistakable impression that Anna State Hospital is far from empty. The memories of suffering, despair, and lingering spirits continue to resonate, ensuring that this facility will never truly be silent. Bridgewater State Hospital in Massachusetts is a place where history and haunting seem inseparably intertwined. Established in the 19th century as a psychiatric facility, it was originally intended to care for individuals with mental illness in a structured and supportive environment. Over the decades, however, the hospital became infamous for overcrowding, experimental treatments, and tragic neglect. Though parts of the hospital remain operational, many wings and buildings have been abandoned, left to decay, their brick walls crumbling and corridors silent. Yet for those who venture into these abandoned areas, the silence is deceptive. Shadowy figures glide through hallways, voices echo from locked rooms, and unexplained noises reverberate through the long-forgotten wings, painting a vivid portrait of a place where the past refuses to rest. Approaching Bridgewater, visitors immediately sense something different. The sprawling campus of brick buildings stretches across gently rolling grounds, some sections overgrown with weeds, others meticulously maintained, a contrast that seems to amplify the eerie atmosphere. Broken windows, rusted fencing, and decaying paths give the impression that time has stopped in certain areas, preserving the memories of those who once walked these halls. Locals often speak of a heavy, oppressive feeling near the older sections, a sensation that grows stronger as the sun sets and shadows stretch across the buildings. Those who explore at night frequently report feeling watched, as if the very walls are aware of their presence. Inside the abandoned wings, the experiences become far more intense. Hallways that once echoed with the voices of patients and staff are now silent, yet visitors often hear footsteps, whispers, and the shifting of unseen objects. Shadowy figures are among the most commonly reported phenomena. These figures often appear at the end of corridors, near stairwells, or beside old patient rooms. Witnesses describe them as dark, indistinct shapes, sometimes moving slowly, other times vanishing the instant they are directly observed. One urban explorer recounted walking down a dimly lit corridor when he noticed a figure leaning against the wall at the far end. He approached cautiously, and the figure seemed to dissolve into thin air, leaving nothing but the cold, still corridor behind. Voices are another unsettling feature of the Bridgewater haunting. Many visitors report hearing conversations, murmurs, or cries coming from rooms that are locked or long abandoned. One explorer described standing outside a former treatment ward when he heard faint voices arguing, their tones sharp and emotional. He tried the doors, but they were locked tight, and no one else was in the vicinity. Moments later, the voices stopped, leaving only an echoing silence that seemed to linger in the air. Other witnesses describe hearing patients calling out for help, staff giving instructions that can no longer be explained, and fragmented sentences repeating over and over, as though the building itself is replaying memories from decades past. Unexplained noises are frequently reported throughout the hospital's abandoned wings. Doors creak or slam, with no apparent cause, objects shift or fall, and sudden bangs or thuds echo down long corridors. One night, a small group exploring the old therapy wing reported hearing the distinct sound of furniture scraping across the floor. When they turned, the room was empty, yet the air still vibrated with the sound, leaving the explorers shaken and uncertain if what they had heard was real or imagined. These sounds often appear to respond to human presence, creating the sense that the hospital is aware of visitors and is actively engaging with them. Cold spots and sudden temperature changes add to the unnerving experiences at Bridgewater. Explorers frequently report feeling icy drafts sweep through rooms or hallways, sometimes accompanied by the sensation of being touched or followed by an invisible presence. One investigator recounted walking through a patient dormitory when a blast of cold air hit him, and he felt the unmistakable pressure of a presence behind him. He turned, but the hallway was empty. The chill lingered as he moved forward, reinforcing the sense that the building itself holds memories and energies that refuse to dissipate. Some of the most chilling accounts involve apparitions performing routine activities from the past. A witness described seeing a shadowy figure at the end of a hallway, bending over a desk as though organizing papers or writing something. When approached, the figure vanished. Others report seeing a dark silhouette pacing the floor of a therapy room or sitting in a long abandoned chair, staring into the distance before fading away. These manifestations are often accompanied by the faint sounds of movement footsteps, the shuffle of clothing, or soft murmurs that make it seem as if the hospital is replaying moments frozen in time. Even the exterior grounds of Bridgewater State Hospital can be unsettling. Locals report seeing shadowy figures moving between buildings after dark, particularly near abandoned wards. Some have witnessed faint lights flickering in windows where electricity no longer flows, or heard footsteps echoing across overgrown walkways. Others have described the sensation of being watched while driving past the facility at night, as though unseen eyes are following every movement. Bridgewater State Hospital's haunted reputation is a chilling reflection of its troubled history. The shadowy figures, the voices echoing from locked rooms, and the unexplained noises in abandoned wings all point to a lingering presence rooted in the pain, confusion, and despair of its past residents. The building is not merely a collection of walls and corridors. It is a living archive of memory and emotion, replaying fragments of lives that cannot be forgotten. For those who step inside Bridgewater's abandoned wings, the experience is unforgettable. The corridors, filled with shadows and whispers, create an atmosphere thick with history and unresolved energy. Ghostly figures drift silently through hallways, voices echo from rooms that can no longer be entered, and noises appear without cause, leaving visitors with the unmistakable feeling that the past is still very much present. Bridgewater State Hospital is more than an abandoned institution. It is a place where memory lingers, where the energy of former patients and staff continues to manifest, and where the echoes of history refuse to remain silent. Elgin State Hospital in Illinois has long been a place where history and haunting intersect. Founded in the late 19th century as a psychiatric facility, the hospital was designed to care for individuals with mental illness, offering treatment and shelter in an era when understanding and compassion were limited. Over time, overcrowding, outdated treatments, and tragic neglect left a dark mark on the institution. Even decades after parts of the hospital were abandoned, the stories of its past seem to linger in the corridors. Travelers and urban explorers report unsettling phenomena: floating figures drifting through empty wards, sudden cold spots that chill the air to an unnatural degree, and whispers carrying fragments of long-forgotten trauma. Elgin State Hospital stands as a testament to the pain, confusion, and suffering that once unfolded within its walls. And the echoes of that past are impossible to ignore. From the exterior, Elgin State Hospital already projects an unsettling presence. Its brick buildings rise across rolling grounds, some still in use, others abandoned and overtaken by weeds, vines, and cracked sidewalks. Broken windows and peeling paint give the buildings an air of neglect, and the silence that blankets the grounds is heavy, almost tangible. Even during daylight hours, visitors report a sense of unease, a feeling that the hospital is alive with unseen observation. Locals tell stories of shadowy forms glimpsed through windows, lights flickering in wings long disconnected from power, and an oppressive stillness that descends when one ventures too close. Inside the abandoned wings, the haunting intensifies. Hallways are long and narrow, lined with peeling paint and decayed flooring, echoing every footstep. Many visitors describe seeing floating figures, often semi-transparent, drifting silently through the corridors. One explorer recounted walking through an old dormitory when he saw a pale figure hovering near a broken window. The figure turned slowly toward him, its features blurred and indistinct, and then vanished into the air, leaving only the lingering chill of its presence. These apparitions appear without warning and dissolve when approached, as though the building itself shields them from direct observation. Cold spots are another hallmark of Elgin State's paranormal activity. Sudden drops in temperature occur in isolated areas, often accompanied by a sensation of being touched or followed. One night, a paranormal investigator recalled walking down a long corridor when a freezing draft swept through, despite no open windows or doors. Simultaneously, he felt an invisible presence brushing against his arm. He spun around, but the hallway was empty, silent, except for the echo of his own heartbeat. These cold spots often linger just long enough to make the air feel oppressive, leaving explorers uneasy and alert to every sound. Whispers are a particularly unnerving aspect of the hospital. Visitors frequently report hearing faint voices that seem to replay fragments of past events. Some whisper patient names or urgent pleas for help, while others mimic the instructions once given by staff during treatments. One visitor described walking through the therapy wing when she heard a soft, anguished voice repeating, "Please." Don't leave me alone." The voice seemed to move through the hallways, fading and returning in different locations, leaving her disoriented and tense. Others report hearing overlapping conversations, murmurs of fear, frustration, or sadness, creating a sense that the hospital is saturated with emotional energy that has never been released. Doors in the abandoned sections of Elgin State often move without explanation. Heavy ward doors are known to creak open slowly or slam shut with force, startling anyone nearby. In one instance, a group exploring the old administration wing recounted a door swinging open in front of them, revealing an empty room, then closing sharply moments later. No wind, no structural failure, and no other person was present. These events occur with such frequency that visitors speak of doors as if they were active participants in the hospital's memory, reacting to the presence of those who enter. Even the exterior grounds add to the eerie atmosphere. On misty nights, locals claim to see shadowy figures moving between buildings or glimpses of floating forms across the overgrown lawns. Some report hearing footsteps along cracked pathways, voices drifting from abandoned wings, or faint light flickering in dark windows. Drivers passing the area often slow, unnerved by glimpses of motion where no one should be. The hospital seems to project its past onto the surrounding grounds, ensuring that its history cannot be ignored. The reports from Elgin State Hospital are consistent and numerous, suggesting a lingering presence rooted in decades of suffering. The floating figures, cold drafts, and whispered echoes point to the trauma endured by patients and staff alike, a pain that has left an indelible imprint on the building. For visitors, the hospital is more than a historical site. It is a living repository of memory, a place where the echoes of the past manifest in tangible and chilling ways. Those who step inside the abandoned wings of Elgin State often leave with more than photographs or curiosity. They leave with an undeniable sense of presence. The floating figures drift silently through corridors. Cold spots sweep across rooms without explanation, and whispers of past trauma echo in empty spaces. Each experience is a reminder that the hospital is far from abandoned in spirit. The memories of suffering, despair, and isolation remain, and the building continues to act as a vessel for these energies. Elgin State Hospital is not merely a relic of psychiatric care. It is a place where the past refuses to remain buried, and where the lingering presence of those who endured its halls ensures that the echoes of trauma will never truly fade. Danville State Hospital in Pennsylvania is a site steeped in history, tragedy, and a haunting legacy that refuses to fade. Established in the late 19th century, the hospital was intended to serve as a facility for the mentally ill, offering treatment and refuge at a time when psychiatric care was still rudimentary. Over decades, however, the institution became notorious for overcrowding, harsh treatments, and neglect. Though parts of the hospital have since closed, leaving abandoned wings and crumbling structures, the echoes of its past remain vivid. Visitors to Danville often report unsettling experiences: phantom patients wandering empty corridors, screams that seem to originate from nowhere, and shadowy figures lurking in the corners of long-forgotten wards. The hospital is a place where the suffering of the past lingers, creating a presence that is impossible to ignore. Approaching Danville State Hospital, one is immediately struck by its imposing architecture. The sprawling brick buildings stretch across uneven terrain, with long wings connected by hallways that seem to extend endlessly. Windows are broken or boarded up, peeling paint clings to the walls, and weeds have overtaken the once tended grounds. Even on a bright day, there is an oppressive atmosphere, a sense that the history of the hospital weighs down the air itself. Locals often speak of feeling uneasy when passing the grounds, as if unseen eyes are watching from within the darkened halls. After dark, the effect intensifies. Shadows lengthen and twist, and the silence is so complete, it almost vibrates with anticipation. Inside the abandoned wings, the atmosphere grows even more unsettling. Long, narrow corridors stretch into darkness, lined with decayed floors and walls that seem to whisper. Many visitors report seeing phantom patients moving through the halls, shadowy figures in old hospital attire, walking slowly as if trapped in a perpetual routine. One urban explorer described entering a former patient dormitory and seeing a faint figure at the end of the hallway. The figure appeared to be hunched, shuffling along as if weighed down by unseen burdens. When he attempted to approach, the figure vanished, leaving only an eerie chill in its place. These apparitions are often fleeting, appearing and disappearing without warning, yet their presence is undeniable. Screams in the corridors are among the most chilling phenomena reported at Danville. Explorers have recounted hearing anguished cries echoing through hallways that are otherwise empty. One visitor describes standing in a long-abandoned ward when a sudden scream pierced the silence, loud and raw, as if someone was in immediate distress. The sound seemed to reverberate off the walls, growing louder and then fading into silence, leaving her shaken and disoriented. Others have reported hearing repeated screams that appear to come from different directions, as if the building itself is replaying moments of fear and pain from its past. These auditory experiences often accompany sudden drops in temperature, making the corridors feel icy and charged with energy. Shadowy figures watching from corners are another frequent occurrence. Visitors report glimpsing indistinct forms standing in the periphery of their vision, often observing silently before melting back into darkness when noticed. One paranormal investigator recounted walking through a therapy wing when he caught the silhouette of a figure leaning against a doorway, partially obscured by shadows. As he approached, the figure seemed to shift, then disappear entirely, leaving him with the sensation of being carefully observed. Many who explore the abandoned sections of Danville describe a persistent feeling of being followed or watched, even when the hallways appear empty. Doors and objects in the hospital also behave unpredictably. Heavy doors are known to swing open or slam shut without explanation, often startling visitors. In one account, a group of explorers entered a locked treatment wing, and a nearby door slowly creaked open on its own. Moments later, it slammed with force, echoing down the corridor. No wind, no structural issue, and no human presence were detected. Other visitors report chairs or small objects moving slightly, as if nudged by invisible hands. These occurrences reinforce the sense that the building is aware of its guests, reacting to their presence and reminding them of the energy that lingers within its walls. Cold spots frequently accompany the apparitions and unexplained noises. Visitors describe sudden, localized drops in temperature, often accompanied by goosebumps or a sense of unease. One explorer recalled walking past a former isolation ward when an icy draft swept across him, and he felt the brush of an unseen presence at his back. Turning quickly revealed nothing, yet the chill persisted, reinforcing the sensation that he was not alone. These cold spots often seem to mark the areas where the hospital's memory is most potent, lingering where trauma and suffering were once concentrated. Even the grounds surrounding Danville State Hospital carry an air of haunting. Locals report seeing figures moving between buildings after dark, or catching glimpses of shadowy shapes among overgrown lawns. Faint lights occasionally flicker in windows of wings long disconnected from power, and the sound of distant footsteps drifts across the grounds. Drivers passing the area at night sometimes slow, unsettled by glimpses of movement or by the sensation of being watched from unseen corners. Danville State Hospital's haunted reputation is not merely legend. The phantom patients, the screams echoing through empty corridors, and the shadowy figures lurking in corners all suggest a lingering presence rooted in the institution's tragic history. The building is more than an abandoned hospital. It is a repository of memory, carrying the pain, confusion, and suffering of countless individuals who once called it home. Those who venture into Danville's abandoned wings often leave with more than a sense of curiosity. The halls filled with shadowy figures, the screams that pierce through silence, and the subtle, unsettling presence in every corner leave visitors with an unmistakable awareness of the past that continues to echo. Danville State Hospital is not merely a site of history. It is a place where memories of suffering, despair, and unresolved energy persist, ensuring that the echoes of its past remain alive for anyone who dares to enter. Metropolitan State Hospital in California has long held a reputation that straddles history and haunting. Established in the early 20th century as a psychiatric facility, The hospital was designed to house and treat patients struggling with mental illness at a time when understanding and care were limited. Over the decades, overcrowding, outdated treatment methods, and occasional neglect left a dark mark on the institution. Even as sections of the hospital were closed and abandoned, the stories of the past persisted, leaving an indelible imprint on the buildings themselves. Visitors and paranormal enthusiasts frequently report chilling phenomena, voices calling out names that seem to come from nowhere, lights flickering with no power source, and apparitions appearing near the old treatment rooms. Metropolitan State Hospital has become a place where the weight of history and lingering spirits converges into a deeply unsettling presence. Approaching the hospital, one is immediately struck by its scale and eerie presence. The sprawling complex stretches across rolling grounds, its brick and concrete buildings partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. Many windows are shattered or boarded up, and the walls show signs of years of decay. Even in daylight, visitors report a heavy atmosphere, a sensation that the air itself is charged with unseen energy. Locals have often recounted the feeling of being watched when passing the property, as if the empty halls are not entirely uninhabited. As darkness falls, the hospital's sinister reputation becomes palpable. Shadows stretch unnaturally along the overgrown pathways, and the silence is broken only by the occasional creak of a long-unused door or the distant rustle of leaves, making every sound seem amplified. Inside the abandoned wings, the unsettling experiences intensify. Long corridors, lined with peeling paint and cracked tiles, stretch seemingly endlessly. Many visitors report hearing voices calling their names, faint but clear, echoing from the locked or long-abandoned rooms. One urban explorer recalled walking past a former patient ward when a whispering voice softly called his name. He froze, scanning the hallway, but no one was there. Moments later, he heard it again, coming from a different direction, as if someone unseen were moving through the corridors, observing his every step. These experiences are often accompanied by sudden drops in temperature, making the air icy and sending chills through anyone present. Apparitions are another frequent phenomenon at Metropolitan State Hospital. Witnesses describe shadowy figures appearing near treatment rooms, standing silently in doorways, or drifting along the hallways. One visitor recounted seeing a semi-transparent figure in an old therapy room, bending over an empty bed as if attending to a patient who had long since vanished. When he approached, the figure slowly dissolved into the shadows, leaving only a cold, lingering presence behind. Others report figures pacing corridors or standing at the ends of hallways, observing silently before disappearing when noticed. The movements are subtle yet deliberate, giving the impression of intelligence and awareness behind these spectral forms. Lights in the hospital are also known to behave inexplicably, even in sections disconnected from electricity. Overhead fixtures or emergency lights sometimes flicker or turn on briefly, casting long shadows down the halls. Visitors report being bathed in sudden flashes of light without any explanation, followed by complete darkness, often in perfect sync with the movement of apparitions or the sounds of distant whispers. One paranormal investigator described walking through a former administrative wing when the lights above began flickering in a slow, rhythmic pattern, as though responding to his presence. The flickering intensified the feeling of being watched, heightening the sense that the hospital itself is aware of the living. Doors and objects also move on their own within the abandoned areas. Heavy metal doors are reported to swing open or shut without cause, sometimes with startling force. Small objects, like chairs or medical equipment, occasionally shift as if nudged by invisible hands. In one account, a group exploring the old treatment wing witnessed a chair glide slowly across the room, stopping just inches from their feet, despite no one being present. These movements reinforce the sensation that Metropolitan State Hospital is not just a static building, but an environment charged with residual energy, reacting to the presence of visitors. Even the exterior grounds contribute to the haunting atmosphere. On misty nights, locals and explorers alike have reported seeing shadowy figures moving between the buildings or glimpses of a pale figure at a broken window. Faint voices sometimes drift across the overgrown lawns, echoing faintly from wings long unused. Footsteps echo along cracked pathways, and distant lights flicker from areas that should be dark. These experiences extend the sense of unease beyond the walls of the hospital, as if the entire property remains imprinted with the energy of its former inhabitants. Metropolitan State Hospital's haunted reputation reflects its troubled history. The voices calling names, flickering lights, and apparitions are not mere legends but accounts reported by numerous visitors, employees, and investigators. The phenomena suggest a lingering presence rooted in the experiences of those who lived, worked, and suffered within its halls. The building has become a vessel for memory, trauma, and unresolved energy, replaying moments from the past in ways that are both subtle and profoundly disturbing. For those who step inside the abandoned wings of Metropolitan State Hospital, the experience is unforgettable. Phantom figures drift through corridors, unseen voices echo from locked rooms, and lights flicker with no explanation. Every hallway, every abandoned room, and every shadowed corner carries a trace of history and a lingering sense of presence. The hospital is more than a collection of decayed buildings. It's a living archive of human experience, where the suffering and stories of former inmates continue to manifest. The memories of trauma, despair, and unresolved energy ensure that Metropolitan State Hospital remains haunted, a place where the past is never truly at rest. Iowa State Hospital in Iowa is a facility steeped in history and haunting, a place where the echoes of the past refuse to fade. Established in the 19th century as a psychiatric institution, it was designed to care for individuals struggling with mental illness, offering treatment in an era when understanding of such conditions was limited. Over time, the hospital became notorious for overcrowding, harsh treatments, and instances of neglect. Today, while some sections remain in use, many wings stand abandoned, their brick walls crumbling, windows shattered, and hallways silent. Despite the decay, visitors report chilling phenomena: ghostly figures drifting through corridors, unexplained cold drafts, and faint voices whispering patient names in deserted wings. Iowa State Hospital has become a place where history and the paranormal intertwine, leaving a lasting impression on anyone who ventures inside. From the moment one approaches the hospital grounds, a sense of unease is palpable. The sprawling complex stretches across open fields, with long wings and multiple buildings, some still maintained, others overtaken by weeds, cracked sidewalks, and peeling paint. Even in daylight, the atmosphere feels heavy, as if the air itself carries the weight of decades of sorrow and suffering. Locals often recount feeling watched when passing the grounds or catching glimpses of shadowy forms in windows. At night, the hospital's eerie reputation comes alive. The long, darkened corridors stretch endlessly. Shadows flicker across broken windows, and silence is broken only by the distant creak of a door or the rustle of leaves along the overgrown paths. Inside the abandoned wings, the haunting becomes immediate and intense. Hallways are lined with chipped paint and cracked tiles, and the remnants of old equipment and furniture lie scattered along the floors. Visitors often report ghostly figures appearing along these corridors. Many of these apparitions are described as semi-transparent, drifting silently as though replaying the routines of long-past patients. One urban explorer recounted walking down a hallway of the old male patient wing when he saw a faint figure leaning against the wall at the far end. The figure seemed to observe him for a moment before fading away into the shadows. Other visitors describe seeing figures pacing, sitting in chairs that have long been abandoned, or standing in doorways, vanishing when approached. These encounters leave an unmistakable impression that the building is inhabited, even when no one else is present. Unexplained cold drafts are another hallmark of Iowa State Hospital's paranormal activity. Visitors often experience sudden drops in temperature in specific areas, even on warm days. One investigator described walking past the former therapy wing when a wave of icy air swept across him, sending chills down his spine. At the same time, he felt a presence behind him, a pressure on the air, though no one was there. These cold spots seem to mark the areas where the hospital's history is most concentrated. lingering where fear, trauma, and suffering were once most intense. Voices whispering patient names are among the most chilling phenomena reported. Explorers frequently hear faint murmurs echoing through empty wards, often repeating the names of individuals who once lived or worked there. One visitor described walking through the women's dormitory when a soft voice called her name, followed by another, barely audible plea for help. She froze, scanning the hall, but the corridor was completely empty. Other visitors report hearing conversations, instructions from staff, or cries of distress, fragmented and difficult to interpret, as though the building itself is replaying the experiences of its former inhabitants. Doors and objects within the abandoned wings often behave inexplicably. Heavy ward doors are reported to swing open or shut without human intervention, sometimes with startling force. In one account, a group exploring a long abandoned wing saw a door slowly open in front of them, revealing an empty room, only to slam shut moments later. Chairs, medical carts, and small objects occasionally shift or topple as if nudged by unseen hands. These occurrences create the impression that the hospital itself is alive with energy, reacting to visitors and replaying the echoes of its history. Even the exterior grounds of Iowa State Hospital carry an air of haunting. On misty evenings, locals have reported seeing shadowy figures moving between buildings, or glimpses of pale forms standing at broken windows. Footsteps sometimes echo along the cracked pathways, and faint voices drift from abandoned wings. Drivers passing the property at night often slow, unnerved by fleeting glimpses of movement or by the pervasive sense of being watched. The energy of the hospital seems to extend beyond its walls, touching everything around it. Iowa State Hospital's haunted reputation is deeply tied to its tragic history. The ghostly figures, cold drafts, and whispered names are more than superstition. They are a reflection of the trauma, confusion, and suffering that occurred within these walls. The building is not simply an abandoned hospital. It is a vessel for memory and emotion, replaying fragments of the lives of those who once lived, worked, and suffered here. For visitors, it is a place where the past is tangible, where the presence of former patients can be felt in every corridor and room. For those who step inside the abandoned wings of Iowa State Hospital, the experience is unforgettable. The hallways echo with whispers, ghostly figures drift silently through corridors, and cold drafts brush across the skin, leaving an undeniable impression of lingering presence. Every step, every shadow, and every unexplained sound serves as a reminder that the building is more than brick and mortar, is a repository of human experience, trauma, and memory. Iowa State Hospital is a place where the past refuses to be forgotten, and where the echoes of suffering continue to resonate, ensuring that its haunting presence will endure for anyone who dares to enter. Central State Hospital in Virginia stands as a sprawling testament to the complex and often tragic history of mental health care in the United States. Established in the late 19th century, it was intended as a facility for the treatment of psychiatric patients, providing care in a time when understanding of mental illness was still limited. Over the decades, the hospital expanded into a massive campus with multiple wings, dormitories, and treatment areas. Yet, along with its growth came tales of overcrowding, outdated practices, and sorrow that seemed to seep into the very walls of the institution. Today, many wings of Central State Hospital stand abandoned, their halls silent and decaying. Yet visitors and urban explorers continue to report phenomena that suggest the past refuses to stay buried. Shadowy figures appear in locked wards, phantom footsteps echo down empty corridors, and objects move seemingly on their own, creating an unsettling sense that the hospital is alive with memory and presence. Approaching Central State, one cannot help but notice the sheer scale of the facility. Brick and stone buildings rise across the rolling campus, with long wings stretching in every direction. Many windows are shattered or boarded up, paint peels from walls, and weeds overtake the once-tended lawns and walkways. Even during daylight hours, the atmosphere is heavy, as though the air carries decades of anguish. Locals recount the feeling of being watched when passing the grounds, and at night the hospital takes on an almost otherworldly quality. Shadows stretch unnaturally, hallways vanish into darkness, and every creak, rustle, or distant thud seems amplified, heightening the impression that the building is observing those who venture inside. Inside the abandoned wings, the haunting becomes immediate. Hallways are narrow and lined with peeling paint, cracked floors, and remnants of long-unused furniture. Many visitors report seeing shadowy figures lurking in the corners or moving along the hallways. One explorer recounted walking down a former patient ward when he noticed a dark, indistinct figure standing near a locked room. The figure seemed to observe him, then slowly dissolved into the shadows as he approached. Others have seen figures pacing, sitting in chairs, or leaning against walls, always vanishing when directly confronted. These apparitions often appear without warning, and their sudden disappearance leaves a lingering sense of unease. Phantom footsteps are another frequently reported phenomenon. Many who explore Central State hear the unmistakable sound of someone walking behind them, pacing the corridor, or approaching from a distance. One visitor described standing in a deserted treatment wing when he heard the deliberate steps of someone walking toward him. He turned quickly, only to find the hallway completely empty. The steps continued for a moment longer, before fading, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. These auditory manifestations create the impression that the hospital is not simply abandoned, but inhabited by echoes of its former residents. Objects moving without explanation further reinforce the eerie reputation of Central State. Chairs have been seen sliding across floors, doors creaking open or slamming shut, and small items like books or medical tools shifting on their own. One paranormal investigator described watching a metal tray in an abandoned treatment room lift slightly, then fall with a clatter, even though no one was near it. These incidents often occur in conjunction with other phenomena, such as cold drafts or apparitions, suggesting that the building itself may be responding to the presence of living visitors or replaying the energy of the past. Cold spots frequently accompany the other paranormal activity within the hospital. Visitors report sudden drops in temperature, often accompanied by goosebumps, shivers, or the sensation of being touched by something unseen. In one account, an explorer walking through a former therapy wing experienced a chilling breeze that seemed to pass through his body, followed by the sensation of a presence moving behind him. When he turned, the hallway was empty, yet the air remained icy, reinforcing the perception that the hospital holds lingering energy that cannot be explained by natural causes. Even the exterior grounds of Central State Hospital contribute to the unsettling atmosphere. Locals describe seeing fleeting shadows moving between buildings after dark, or catching glimpses of forms standing in broken windows. Footsteps sometimes echo across the overgrown walkways, and faint voices drift from wings long abandoned. Drivers passing the hospital at night often report feeling as though they are being watched, an unnerving impression that extends the influence of the building beyond its walls. Central State Hospital's haunted reputation reflects the cumulative weight of its history. The shadowy figures in locked wards, phantom footsteps, and objects moving by themselves are more than anecdotal. They are accounts that have been reported repeatedly by visitors, investigators, and locals alike. The phenomenon suggests that the hospital is not simply a physical structure, but a vessel for memory, emotion, and unresolved energy. The presence of those who lived, worked, and suffered within the hospital seems to linger, replaying fragments of their lives for those who enter. For anyone who steps into the abandoned wings of Central State Hospital, the experience is unforgettable. The hallways echo with footsteps that no one can explain. Shadowy figures drift silently in the corners, and objects move of their own accord, leaving an unmistakable sense that the past is alive. The building is more than an empty institution. It is a living repository of human experience, holding within it the echoes of suffering, despair, and unresolved presence. Central State Hospital is a place where the memories of the past continue to walk the halls, ensuring that its haunting remains vivid for anyone who dares to enter. Medfield State Hospital in Massachusetts is a place steeped in history and a haunting reputation that continues to draw the curious and the brave. Established in the late 19th century as a psychiatric institution, the hospital was designed to house and treat patients with mental illness at a time when understanding of mental health was rudimentary at best. Over the decades, Medfield became infamous for overcrowding, harsh treatments, and tragic neglect, leaving behind a legacy that seems to have imprinted itself on the very walls of the facility. Even decades after parts of the hospital were abandoned, visitors continue to report unnerving experiences, ghostly figures roaming the halls, doors opening and closing by themselves, and distant screams echoing from wards long empty. The hospital is a place where the suffering of the past refuses to remain buried, manifesting in ways that are impossible to ignore. The grounds of Medfield State Hospital immediately convey an atmosphere of unease. The sprawling campus features multiple brick buildings connected by long hallways, many of which are now crumbling or overgrown with vegetation. Broken windows, peeling paint, and rusted gates give the impression that the hospital has been frozen in time, preserving both its architecture and its memories. Even during daylight hours, visitors often report a heavy, oppressive feeling, as if the very air carries the weight of decades of fear, sorrow, and unresolved anguish. Locals speak of seeing shadowy figures moving behind the windows or glimpses of movement where no one should be, creating a persistent sense of being watched. At night, these feelings intensify, with the shadows lengthening along cracked walkways and the silence of the grounds broken only by distant, unexplained sounds. Inside the abandoned wings, the haunting becomes far more pronounced. Long corridors stretch endlessly, their cracked floors and peeling paint lending an eerie sense of decay. Many visitors report seeing figures moving along these hallways, often described as shadowy silhouettes of former patients in old hospital attire. One explorer recounted walking through the male patient wing when he noticed a dark figure pacing slowly at the end of the corridor. As he approached, the figure vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only a chilling emptiness. Others report seeing figures sitting in chairs, leaning against walls, or drifting silently through doorways. Their presence felt rather than fully seen. These apparitions often appear and disappear unpredictably, heightening the sense that the building itself is alive with memories. Doors in Medfield State Hospital frequently behave in ways that defy explanation. Heavy ward doors are known to swing open or close without warning, sometimes slamming shut with startling force. One visitor described standing outside a former treatment room when the door slowly creaked open as if inviting him in, only to swing shut moments later with a loud bang that echoed down the corridor. Such occurrences are common and add to the perception that the building responds to the presence of visitors, replaying the motions and sounds of a past that continues to linger. Even smaller objects, such as chairs or medical equipment, have been reported to move or shift mysteriously, reinforcing the notion that the hospital is saturated with residual energy. Echoes of distant screams are among the most chilling phenomena at Medfield State Hospital. Visitors frequently report hearing sharp, anguished cries reverberating down long, empty hallways. One urban explorer described walking through an abandoned dormitory when a scream pierced the silence, sounding as though someone was in immediate terror. The sound seemed to bounce off the walls, growing louder and fading again into eerie quiet. Others have heard overlapping screams or fragmented shouts, creating an auditory tapestry of past pain that seems to replay the suffering endured within the hospital's walls. These sounds are often accompanied by cold drafts or sudden changes in temperature, heightening the sense of danger and unease. Cold spots are another hallmark of Medfield's haunted presence. Visitors frequently experience sudden, localized drops in temperature that chill the air to an unnatural degree. One investigator recalled walking through a former therapy wing when a sudden icy draft swept over him, sending goosebumps across his skin. At the same time, he felt a pressure behind him, a sensation that someone or something was observing his every move. When he turned, the corridor was empty, yet the chill lingered, emphasizing the lingering presence of unseen entities. Even the exterior of the hospital carries an air of haunting. Overgrown paths and neglected grounds are often sites of unexplained occurrences. Locals have reported seeing shadowy figures moving between buildings or catching glimpses of pale silhouettes in broken windows. The faint sound of footsteps, whispers, or distant cries sometimes drifts across the property, adding to the sense that the hospital continues to replay the memories of those who once lived there. Drivers passing the area after dark often feel an uncanny presence, as if unseen eyes are tracking every movement. Medfield State Hospital's haunting is more than legend. It reflects a legacy of suffering and unresolved trauma. The ghostly figures, doors moving on their own, and echoes of screams are manifestations of the intense human experiences that took place within these walls. Visitors often leave with more than a sense of curiosity. They carry a tangible awareness of the hospital's energy and history, feeling the lingering presence of patients and staff who can no longer rest. For anyone entering Medfield State Hospital's abandoned wings, the experience is unforgettable. Shadowy figures drift through corridors, doors move inexplicably, and distant screams echo in ways that make the air itself feel alive. Every hallway, every room, and every shadowed corner tells a story of suffering, despair, and unresolved energy. The hospital is more than a decaying structure. It is a living repository of human memory, where the echoes of the past continue to manifest. Medfield State Hospital is a place where the presence of former patients endures, ensuring that the haunting remains vivid, palpable, and impossible to forget for anyone who dares to enter. Worcester State Hospital in Massachusetts has long held a reputation that blends history with haunting. Established in the 19th century as a psychiatric institution, the hospital was built to provide care for individuals struggling with mental illness at a time when treatment methods were often primitive and misunderstood. Over the decades, Worcester State Hospital became infamous for overcrowding, harsh regimens, and the emotional toll it took on both patients and staff. Today, parts of the hospital remain abandoned, their corridors silent and deteriorating. Yet the echoes of its past continue to manifest in chilling ways. Locals and visitors alike report seeing apparitions wandering the halls, experiencing sudden cold spots in empty rooms, and hearing phantom voices that repeat conversations long forgotten. Worcester State Hospital is a place where the past refuses to stay buried, and the lingering energy of former patients and staff creates a palpable presence that cannot be ignored. Approaching the hospital grounds, one is immediately struck by the imposing architecture. Brick buildings rise across expansive grounds, some still maintained while others are left to decay. Windows are broken or boarded up, paint peels from the walls, and the landscape is overgrown with weeds and neglected pathways. Even during daylight hours, a heavy atmosphere pervades the air, as though the walls themselves have absorbed decades of suffering. Locals often report a sense of being watched when passing the hospital, and many speak of fleeting shadows glimpsed through windows or moving along overgrown walkways. At night, the hospital becomes even more forbidding. Long shadows stretch along cracked paths, distant trees sway silently in the wind, and the occasional creak of an old door echoes across the grounds, amplifying the feeling that the complex is far from empty. Inside the abandoned wings, the haunting becomes more pronounced. Hallways stretch endlessly, lined with cracked tiles and peeling paint, and the remnants of old furniture and equipment remain scattered. Many visitors report seeing ghostly apparitions drifting silently through these corridors. These figures often appear partially transparent, dressed in period hospital attire, and move in a manner that seems purposeful, as though replaying routines of the past. One urban explorer recounted walking through a former patient dormitory when a pale figure appeared at the end of the hall. The figure remained stationary for a moment, then slowly faded into the shadows as he approached. Others have reported seeing multiple figures pacing, leaning against walls, or standing in doorways, vanishing when directly confronted. These sightings leave visitors with an unmistakable impression that the building is inhabited, even when no living person is present. Cold spots are another hallmark of Worcester State Hospital's paranormal activity. Visitors often experience sudden drops in temperature in isolated areas, particularly in long-abandoned rooms or hallways. One investigator described walking through the therapy wing when an icy draft swept across him, sending goosebumps along his arms. He felt as though someone unseen was watching or even brushing past him, but when he turned, the space was empty. These cold spots are frequently accompanied by other phenomena, such as moving objects or phantom voices, and often appear in areas with the heaviest concentration of reported apparitions. Phantom voices are among the most unsettling features of the hospital. Visitors report hearing faint conversations, echoes of past interactions, or even patient names whispered in the dark. One urban explorer described entering an old common room where he distinctly heard the murmured voice of a patient calling for a nurse, followed by the soft replies of staff. He turned the room over in search of the source, but found only empty chairs and the remnants of what had once been a busy space. Others report hearing fragmented conversations, laughter, or cries for help, often moving from room to room in ways that suggest the building itself is replaying echoes of its own history. These voices can be disorienting, making it difficult to distinguish between memory and present reality, and leaving visitors with a profound sense of unease. Doors and objects in the abandoned wings often behave inexplicably. Heavy doors are known to swing open or close without any human intervention, sometimes slamming shut with surprising force. Small objects, such as chairs or medical tools, occasionally shift or fall, as if nudged by unseen hands. One visitor recalled watching a metal tray slowly slide across the floor in a deserted treatment room, then clatter loudly as it fell, even though no one else was in the room. Such occurrences reinforce the impression that the hospital is alive with residual energy, responding to the presence of those who enter. Even the hospital's exterior contributes to its haunting reputation. Locals report shadowy figures moving between buildings at night, faint lights flickering in abandoned wings, and whispers drifting from long-forgotten rooms. Footsteps echo across cracked pathways, and fleeting glimpses of figures in windows are enough to make many pause. Drivers passing the hospital after dark often report a sense of unease, as if unseen eyes are following their every movement. The energy of Worcester State Hospital extends beyond its walls, touching the grounds and pathways that surround the buildings. Worcester State Hospital's haunting is a reflection of its troubled history. The apparitions, cold spots, and phantom voices are not mere legends. They are manifestations of the trauma, fear, and suffering that occurred within these walls. Visitors frequently leave with more than curiosity. They carry with them a tangible awareness of the hospital's lingering presence. Every hallway, every abandoned room, and every shadowed corner seems to contain a fragment of memory, replaying the experiences of patients and staff who can no longer rest. Those who enter the abandoned wings of Worcester State Hospital often find the experience unforgettable. Ghostly figures drift silently through corridors, cold spots chill the air, and phantom voices repeat conversations from decades past. The building is more than a decayed institution. It is a vessel of memory, carrying the echoes of human suffering, despair, and unresolved energy. Worcester State Hospital is a place where the past remains palpable, ensuring that the haunting presence of those who lived, suffered, and worked within its walls will continue to be felt for anyone who dares to step inside. Norfolk State Hospital in Virginia has long held a reputation as one of the most unsettling psychiatric facilities in the region. Established in the late 19th century, the hospital was intended to provide care for the mentally ill during a period when treatment options were limited and often harsh. Over the decades, Norfolk State became notorious for overcrowding, strict regimens, and tragic incidents that left a mark on both staff and patients. Even after sections of the hospital were closed and abandoned, the building retained a chilling presence, a lingering echo of its troubled past. Visitors and urban explorers frequently report encounters with ghostly patients, shadowy figures resembling nurses, and unexplained whispers drifting through the corridors. Norfolk State Hospital is a place where history and haunting converge, creating an atmosphere that is impossible to ignore. Approaching Norfolk State Hospital, one immediately senses the weight of its history. The sprawling campus stretches across uneven grounds, with multiple brick and concrete buildings connected by long corridors. Windows are broken or boarded up, paint peels from walls, and the grounds are overgrown with weeds and cracked walkways. Even during the day, there is a palpable heaviness in the air, a feeling that the building itself remembers the suffering that occurred within its walls. Locals report a persistent sense of being observed when passing the hospital, and glimpses of shadows moving through the windows are not uncommon. As darkness falls, the unsettling atmosphere intensifies. The long, abandoned hallways seem to stretch endlessly into the night, and the silence is broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves, the creak of an old door, or the faint sound of distant movement. Inside the hospital, the haunting becomes more immediate. Long, narrow corridors stretch endlessly, lined with cracked tiles, peeling paint, and remnants of furniture left behind decades ago. Many visitors describe seeing ghostly patients wandering the halls. These figures are often semi-transparent, dressed in period hospital attire, and move in a way that suggests repetition of old routines. One urban explorer recounted walking through a former patient dormitory when he noticed a faint figure sitting at the end of the hallway. The figure remained stationary for a moment, then slowly faded into the shadows as he approached. Other witnesses have reported multiple apparitions pacing hallways, leaning against walls, or standing silently in doorways. These experiences are fleeting, yet they leave an unmistakable impression that the hospital is inhabited by more than memory alone. Shadowy figures, resembling nurses, are another common phenomenon. Visitors often describe seeing dark silhouettes moving through treatment areas or standing at the ends of corridors, observing silently before vanishing. One investigator reported seeing a figure in a nurse's uniform near a former medication room. As he approached, the figure disappeared into the wall, leaving a cold spot in its wake. These encounters suggest that the lingering energy of the hospital is tied not only to the patients, but also to the staff, who once worked tirelessly within its walls, many of whom experienced their own traumas. Unexplained whispers are among the most unnerving experiences at Norfolk State Hospital. Explorers frequently report hearing soft voices echoing through the abandoned corridors. Sometimes they are calling names, other times repeating fragments of conversations that seem to belong to a long-forgotten past. One visitor described standing in a therapy wing when she heard a faint whisper say her name, followed by the soft murmur of someone asking for help. She spun around, expecting to see someone, but the hallway was empty. The whispers often drift unpredictably, seeming to follow visitors from room to room, creating the eerie impression that the building itself is replaying moments from its history. Doors and objects in the hospital also behave inexplicably. Heavy ward doors are reported to swing open or slam shut without warning, often startling those nearby. Small items, such as chairs or medical equipment, occasionally shift or fall, seemingly moved by unseen hands. One urban explorer recalled a metal tray sliding slowly across a room, clattering to the floor, despite no human presence nearby. These occurrences reinforce the impression that Norfolk State Hospital is more than a decayed structure. It is a vessel of lingering energy, responding to the presence of visitors and replaying echoes of its past. Cold spots frequently accompany the apparitions and sounds. Visitors often experience sudden, localized drops in temperature, accompanied by shivers or the sensation of being watched. One investigator described walking past a former isolation ward when a freezing draft swept across him, followed by a faint feeling of pressure behind his back. When he turned, the corridor was empty, yet the chill persisted, leaving an unmistakable impression of an unseen presence. These cold spots are often found in the areas where the hospital's history was most intense, concentrated in treatment rooms, dormitories, and former patient wards. Even the grounds surrounding Norfolk State Hospital carry an air of haunting. Locals report seeing figures moving between buildings after dark or catching glimpses of shadowy silhouettes in broken windows. Faint footsteps echo across cracked pathways, and whispers sometimes drift from long-abandoned wings. Drivers passing the property at night often feel a sense of unease, as if unseen eyes are following them. The influence of the hospital seems to extend beyond its walls, touching the surrounding landscape with the same chilling energy that lingers inside. Norfolk State Hospital's haunted reputation reflects its troubled history. The ghostly patients, shadowy nurses, unexplained whispers, and moving objects are more than tales. They are manifestations of the suffering, fear, and unresolved energy that permeate the building. The hospital is a repository of memory, carrying the echoes of those who lived, worked, and suffered there. For visitors, it is impossible to leave without feeling the lingering presence of the past. For anyone venturing into the abandoned wings of Norfolk State Hospital, the experience is unforgettable. Ghostly figures drift silently through hallways, shadowy nurses appear and vanish, whispers echo from empty rooms, and cold drafts chill the air. Every corridor, every room, and every shadowed corner serves as a reminder of the hospital's history, its tragedies, and the lingering presence of those who cannot rest. Norfolk State Hospital is more than a building. It is a living archive of memory, trauma, and unresolved energy, ensuring that its haunting presence will continue to be felt for anyone who dares to enter. Binghamton Psychiatric Center in New York is a sprawling facility whose history is steeped in tragedy, suffering, and lingering mystery. Founded in the early 20th century, the center was originally built to provide care for individuals struggling with severe mental illness, at a time when treatment options were limited and often harsh. Over the decades, the hospital became known not only for its size, but also for the stories of overcrowding, experimental treatments, and the emotional toll endured by both patients and staff. Though parts of the complex have since been abandoned, the building's chilling presence remains. Visitors and urban explorers report a range of paranormal phenomena, shadowy figures appearing at windows, sudden cold drafts in otherwise empty rooms, and faint voices repeating in abandoned wards. Binghamton Psychiatric Center is a place where the echoes of suffering refuse to remain silent, leaving a palpable impression on anyone who enters. Approaching the hospital, one is immediately struck by its vast, foreboding architecture. Brick buildings stretch across a wide campus, interconnected by long corridors and stairwells. Many windows are broken or boarded up, paint peels from the walls, and weeds overrun sidewalks and courtyards. Even during the day, there is a sense of oppressive heaviness, as though the very walls retain the memories of decades of pain. Locals speak of seeing shadowy figures moving behind the windows or along the overgrown pathways. At night, the atmosphere becomes even more unnerving. Shadows stretch across the cracked grounds, and every creak or rustle seems amplified. The wind whistles through broken windows, and distant footsteps echo where no one is present. Inside the abandoned wings, the haunting becomes unmistakable. Long hallways stretch into darkness, lined with cracked tiles and peeling paint, and scattered remnants of old furniture and medical equipment remain in disarray. Visitors frequently report seeing ghostly figures moving along these corridors. Many of these apparitions are described as semi-transparent and often appear dressed in period patient attire, pacing or sitting as if replaying past routines. One urban explorer recounted walking through a former patient wing when he noticed a faint figure leaning against a far wall. As he approached, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving an emptiness that felt tangible. Others have reported multiple figures drifting silently through corridors, vanishing the moment they are confronted. Figures at windows are another frequently reported phenomenon at Binghamton Psychiatric Center. Visitors often catch glimpses of pale, shadowy shapes standing behind glass panes, sometimes staring out at the grounds or silently observing those below. One witness described walking along the exterior of the main building at dusk when he noticed a figure in a window, illuminated briefly by the fading light. The figure appeared to be wearing hospital clothing from decades past. Moments later, it vanished, leaving only the cracked glass and the fading reflection of the witness. These apparitions create a sense that the hospital is still inhabited, despite years of abandonment. Cold drafts often accompany these visual phenomena, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Explorers frequently report sudden drops in temperature, sometimes localized to specific rooms or hallways. One visitor described entering an abandoned therapy wing when a wave of icy air swept over him, chilling him to the bone. At the same time, he sensed a presence nearby, but when he turned, the corridor was empty. These cold spots are often reported in areas where suffering and trauma were most intense, suggesting that the hospital itself retains the energy of its past. Voices repeating in abandoned wards are among the most unnerving occurrences. Visitors frequently hear murmurs, fragments of conversation, or names being called out softly in the empty hallways. One urban explorer recounted standing in a former dormitory when he heard the whispered name of a patient, followed by what sounded like an exchange between staff members. When he turned to investigate, the room was completely empty. Other witnesses report hearing laughter, cries, or the fragmented voices of patients that drift from one room to another, creating the impression that the walls themselves are replaying moments from decades past. These auditory phenomena can be disorienting, leaving visitors unsure whether they are witnessing the past or present. Doors and objects within the hospital frequently behave inexplicably. Heavy ward doors swing open or close without human intervention, sometimes with startling force. Chairs, medical carts, and small objects occasionally move or fall, as if nudged by unseen hands. One investigator described watching a metal tray slide across a deserted treatment room, only to clatter loudly to the floor moments later, despite the absence of anyone nearby. These occurrences reinforce the sense that Binghamton Psychiatric Center is a living archive of memory, where the energy of the past continues to manifest in physical ways. Even the exterior grounds of the hospital contribute to its haunting reputation. Shadowy figures are sometimes seen moving between buildings, and glimpses of pale silhouettes at broken windows are common at dusk or after dark. Footsteps echo across cracked walkways, and faint voices sometimes drift from abandoned wings. Drivers passing the property at night often report feeling watched, an unsettling sensation that amplifies the eerie presence of the hospital beyond its walls. Binghamton Psychiatric Center's haunting is inseparable from its history. The shadowy figures, cold drafts, and repeating voices are manifestations of the pain, fear, and unresolved trauma that occurred within its walls. Visitors often leave with more than a sense of curiosity. They carry a palpable awareness of the hospital's lingering presence. Every hallway, abandoned room, and shadowed corner tells a story of suffering that refuses to be forgotten. For those who venture into the abandoned wings of Binghamton Psychiatric Center, the experience is unforgettable. Ghostly figures drift silently through corridors, shadowy shapes appear at windows, cold drafts chill the air, and voices echo through deserted wards. Every corner of the building is a reminder of the hospital's troubled past, and the lingering presence of those who lived, worked, and suffered within ensures that its haunting will continue to be felt by anyone daring enough to enter. Binghamton Psychiatric Center is not merely an abandoned institution. It is a living repository of human experience, memory, and unresolved energy, where the echoes of the past refuse to remain silent. These 25 haunted hospitals remind us that the past never truly dies. From shadowy patients to phantom nurses, from unexplained whispers to apparitions in deserted wings, the echoes of suffering and madness remain, lingering where history meets the supernatural. Thank you for joining us on this chilling exploration of America's haunted hospitals and asylums. Subscribe, like, and click the bell to continue journeying into the places where history, horror, and the human soul collided, where the patients never truly left.